Chapter 1276. Long Shao nodded with satisfaction. If that's the case, Minister Qian, what you said earlier, the national treasury is empty. Minister Qian showed a difficult smile. I was confused for a moment. Long Shao nodded and said directly, in that case, I will give Minister Qian full responsibility for the construction of the palace. Minister Qian raised his head in surprise. He did not understand why the emperor not only did not punish him, but also gave him such an important matter. Long Shao saw his expression and frowned slightly. Minister Qian, do you think there is a problem? Minister Qian quickly bowed, I have no problem. When Minister Qian returned to the queue, Long Shao looked around, do you have anything else to report? The ministers looked at each other and shook their heads. Listening to His Majesty's words, they suddenly realized that as long as His Majesty was diligent and loved the people, he could let the people live a good life. If he wanted to spend money, he could spend it. Sky Dragon was so powerful, so it was not a problem for the emperor to show off a little. Therefore, when Long Shao once again ordered to find a famous botanist to plant a 10-mile peach blossom forest in the palace, no minister stood up to object. The whole world belonged to His Majesty. It was just planting some fresh peach blossoms. It was much better than some strange and cruel hobby. Long Shao was very satisfied with this. Although he would not change his mind even if these ministers objected, it was going so smoothly. After all, it was not that annoying, right? When autumn was about to pass and the palace in Sky Dragon's palace had begun to take shape, the ministers of Sky Dragon were once again shocked by their emperor. Their emperor was going to propose to Her Highness the eldest princess of Qing. Logically speaking, the Qing dynasty was a big country that could be compared to Sky Dragon. The famous eldest princess of Qing was said to be the sister of the emperor of Qing. Her status was also very noble. In that case, she was a good match for His Majesty. But the key was that His Majesty was going to propose in person. How could there be such a thing? The marriage between big countries had always been to send envoys to propose. No matter how noble the eldest princess was, it was enough to send a prince. A gentleman did not sit in a dangerous situation. How could the emperor of a country personally take risks? But His Majesty the Emperor of Sky Dragon was never someone who would listen to others' advice. No matter how much the ministers tried to persuade him, he even set the schedule for the meeting. Before he left, he had specially written a letter and had it sent urgently to the Emperor of the Qing Kingdom. Emperor Long Qing, who was no longer young, was speechless for a long time when he saw the letter of credence from the new Emperor of Tianlong. How far was Tianlong from the Qing Kingdom? If one were to ride a fast horse, it would take at least half a month. If they were to travel in a convoy, it would take at least a month. How could he bear to marry his sister off to such a faraway place? If Bao Chan went to Sky Dragon, she might not be able to come back for the rest of her life. However, the Emperor of Sky Dragon had personally come to propose. With such sincerity, Emperor Long Qing was afraid that refusing would cause the two countries to become enemies. After thinking for a while, he went to the Empress Dowager's palace. What? The well-preserved Empress Dowager sat beside the Emperor and looked like someone of the same age. I don't agree. The Empress Dowager refused without thinking, I only have one daughter, Bao Chan. Your Majesty, can you bear to separate us? The Emperor had always been filial. When he heard this, he immediately smiled bitterly and said that he did not dare. Chapter 1277. In his heart, he had never thought of letting Yongla go through a marriage. He only had one baby sister, and he had always wanted to choose the best husband for her in the whole of Qing Kingdom. Long Shao did not know that his future mother-in-law and brother-in-law were already thinking about how to reject him before he even set off. At the same time, Gu Xingyin also received the news from the system that Long Shao was coming to Qing Kingdom. He's coming to Qing Kingdom to ask for my hand in marriage. And not just for a marriage, but also specifically for me. Gu Xingyin was a little stunned. She was not surprised that Long Shao would do this, but felt that this method was too different from the original plot. System, is this really okay? She was a little hesitant. The system replied, Host, as long as Princess Yongla successfully marries into the Sky Dragon Empire, the power of Qin Kingdom will be strengthened. Furthermore, as mentioned in the plot, it brings even more powerful weapons and forging techniques to the Qin Kingdom, facilitating hundreds of years of peace between the Qin Kingdom and Tianlong. There are no problems with the host's mission. Hearing the system's words, Gu Xingyin was relieved. The emperor did not deliberately publicize this matter, but as the arrival of the Sky Dragon diplomatic corps approached, the emperor had to put the reception schedule on the court. The emperor did not say the purpose of the new emperor of Tianlong. He only said that the new emperor of Tianlong dynasty, who had just ascended the throne, would come to Qin Kingdom on the 15th of the next month, and let the Ministry of Rites prepare the highest standard of reception. Because he thought that he was going to reject the young emperor of Tianlong, Emperor Long Qing had some indescribable subtle feelings in his heart, and felt that he could make up for it in other ways. For example, when the Sky Dragon diplomatic corps arrived, he would personally go and receive them. Since the other party was also the emperor of a country, it would not be too demeaning for him to personally receive them. The whole of Qin Kingdom was excited about this matter. Although they did not know the purpose of the visit for the time being, the courtiers and people of Qin Kingdom also felt that this was a very exciting matter. To be able to make such a powerful emperor of Tianlong dynasty come to visit so solemnly, it also highlighted the strength of Qin Kingdom, did it not? On the day of the arrival of the Sky Dragon diplomatic corps, countless people of Qin Kingdom ran to the streets and stopped to watch. Emperor Long Qing was waiting for the arrival of the other party at the city gate in 12 jade robes. On this day, countless citizens of Qin were excited because not only did they see the emperor they had never seen before, but they also saw the emperor of the distant Tianlong dynasty. There were also countless unmarried young girls of the Qin Kingdom who secretly blushed. They had only heard that this young emperor was very young, but they had never heard that he looked so heroic and extraordinary. The officials who had come with Long Shao to the Qin Kingdom had always held a grudge against their emperor's willful behavior. After seeing the Qin Kingdom's thoughtful etiquette, they felt a little better. The banquet was specially prepared to welcome the heavenly dragon emissary. The day before the celestial dragon emissary arrived in the Qin Kingdom, Emperor Long Qing quietly summoned Gu Xingyin into the palace and told her of this matter. In Emperor Long Qing's heart, his Bao Chan would definitely not be willing to marry to such a faraway place, so he did not even wait for Gu Xingyin's reply. He said directly, Bao Chan, don't worry. I will not let that Emperor Tianlong succeed. Gu Xingyin, she could only helplessly lower her eyes and said, it's up to you. Gao Lingji had been outside in the cold wind for a day and had been completely blown into a stupid branch. For chapters, there should be 2 more. Her mind was completely muddled. Only 6 chapters today. I'm really sorry, there will be 10,000 tomorrow. Moi moi moi. Chapter 1278. Emperor Long Qing raised the wine cup in his hand and personally toasted Long Shao. Your Majesty, you are young and talented. You are truly admirable. Long Shao also quickly raised the wine cup in his hand. Compared to you, Your Majesty, I can only be considered a junior. Your Majesty is overpraising me. This sentence made Emperor Long Qing very happy. He drank the wine in his cup in one gulp. In his heart, he admired the young emperor even more. Of course, he also became more vigilant. To become the ruler of a country at such a young age, it was rare that he did not have the arrogance of ordinary young people. Such a person was certainly not ordinary. Emperor Long Qing had heard some things about Sky Dragon. If the Emperor of Sky Dragon had no tricks up his sleeve, how could he control the whole of Sky Dragon in such a short time? Emperor Long Qing thought this in his heart, but he did not know that the Emperor of Sky Dragon, who had left a deep impression in his heart, was quietly focused on his own sister. From the moment Long Shao entered the hall, he had been looking at Gu Xingyin from the corner of his eye. Both of them were very noble people. Naturally, their seats were the closest to Emperor Long Qing. So, Long Shao could easily see the expression on Gu Xingyin's face. He saw the shock that could not be hidden when her gaze fell on his face. But it was only for a moment. After Gu Xingyin drank a cup of wine, her expression returned to its usual coldness. She did not look at him again. Long Shao was a little depressed. He was still thinking carefully. Was Yongle angry? Yes, he had treated her like that and was unwilling to tell her his identity. Now that he had suddenly appeared, it would certainly cause her dissatisfaction. But, a look of determination flashed through Long Zhao's eyes. Dissatisfaction? It was fine. He still had endless time in the future to make her satisfied. He could not wait to settle the relationship between the two of them. He wanted her to belong to him. Emperor Long Qing took a look and happened to see the young Emperor of Sky Dragon looking at his sister. The emotion in his eyes moved him. At the same time, Emperor Long Qing was confused. Was this the first time the Emperor of Sky Dragon came to Qing Kingdom? Why did it seem like he had seen Bao Chan before? Qing Emperor, Long Shao suddenly stood up and called out to him. Emperor Long Qing had a bad premonition. He instinctively wanted to say something to interrupt Long Shao, but he did not succeed. I have come to the Qing Kingdom this time because I want the Sky Dragon and the Qing Kingdom to be on good terms forever, Long Shao said with a smile. As soon as he said this, the ministers on the Sky Dragon's side were still fine. After all, they had already known about their Majesty's plan. However, the Qing Kingdom exploded. The courtiers discussed fervently, all saying that this was the case. No wonder Sky Dragon would suddenly send an envoy to Qing Kingdom. As for the marriage alliance, most of the ministers' first reaction was that it was a good thing. The Great Qing Dynasty and the Sky Dragon Dynasty were among the top powers on this continent. The Qing Kingdom was rich, and the Sky Dragon was famous for his powerful battle prowess. If the Qing Kingdom could form a marriage alliance with Tianlong, then the two countries could exchange what they needed. This was, without question, a very good thing. Only Emperor Long Qing's expression changed slightly when he heard these words. He really didn't think that the Emperor of Sky Dragon would actually say this in front of so many people. Chapter 1279. Emperor Long Qing thought to himself. Fortunately, His Majesty didn't say it out loud. He wanted Bao Chan. If he said it, he might be able to deal with it. But it was clear that his thinking was too simple. Because soon, Long Shao opened his mouth again. I am willing to marry your country's eldest princess Yongle as the empress. When these words were said, the entire hall was silent. The officials of Qing Kingdom were all silent. No wonder they didn't see any joy on His Majesty's face. Sky Dragon had taken a fancy to the eldest princess. Who was the eldest princess? She was the pearl of Qing Kingdom. She was His Majesty's treasure. It turned out that Sky Dragon's people had such thoughts. Many officials felt uncomfortable in their hearts. Was the most beautiful and noble eldest princess of Qing Kingdom going to be held in the arms of a foreigner? Even if the other party was the emperor, they still felt uncomfortable. While the officials of Qing Kingdom were suffering in their hearts, Sky Dragon's envoys were very satisfied. At first, they didn't want His Majesty to personally go to Qing Kingdom. They felt that this would lower His Majesty's status. But when it was time to leave, perhaps because they knew that this matter was inevitable, the resistance in their hearts lessened a lot. Moreover, the people who followed Long Shao on the diplomatic mission were all his trusted subordinates. No matter what, they would support his decision. This mood completely changed when they saw eldest Princess Yongle sitting in the hall. No one had ever seen the rumored eldest Princess Yongle. However, when all the heavenly dragon ambassadors saw Gu Xingyin for the first time, they knew in their hearts that this must be eldest Princess Yongle of the Qing Kingdom. Other than such a beauty, such bearing, and such charm, who else could bear the title of the most beautiful woman in the world? No wonder His Majesty was willing to come personally to ask for her hand in marriage. For such a beauty, so what if he lowered his status for her? Indeed, His Majesty had good taste. Sky Dragon's envoys thought so. Emperor Long Qing could no longer maintain the smile on his face. How could he reply to His Majesty, the Emperor of Sky Dragon, saying such words under such circumstances? If he refused in public, there would be no hope for a good relationship between the two countries. But if he didn't refuse? He felt that his sister would not be willing to marry Bao Chan off so rashly. Emperor Long Qing coughed lightly and was about to ask for a delay in this matter. Long Xiao looked gently at Gu Xingyin, who had been glaring at him unhappily ever since he finished speaking. It was so beautiful. This kind of expression was much better than coldly ignoring me. He stared at Gu Xingyin without blinking, but his words were said to everyone, "This one can swear that in this life, I will marry the eldest princess as my empress. My only wish is to grow old with the eldest princess. There will only be one person in the harem." His words shocked everyone. These words were already shocking enough. Even an ordinary wealthy family would have one or two concubines. This dignified ruler of the world actually said that there was only one person in the harem. If the officials of the Qin kingdom were only shocked, then the officials of Tianlong were terrified. How could their emperor be so willful? What does the royal family value the most? Heirs. Such words were simply unfilial to the ancestors. But in such an occasion, these officials could not kneel and beg the emperor to take back his words like in the court. Outside, especially in front of other countries, the dignity of their emperor could not be offended. Chapter 1280. The officials of Tianlong could only look at their emperor anxiously. They had never hoped so earnestly that their emperor would go back on his word. Another group of officials looked eagerly at the Qin kingdom. At first, they were proud of their emperor's good taste. Now, they wanted the Qin kingdom to refuse. As long as the Qin kingdom was unwilling to marry the eldest princess to Tianlong, then their emperor's promise would be useless. But Emperor Long Qing was silent. Initially, he wanted to refuse, but after hearing the words of this young monarch Tianlong, he swallowed his words back down. No matter what would happen in the future, at this moment, the emperor could say that he did not want a harem. It was enough to see how important Bao Chan was in his heart. He could find a talented and handsome husband for Bao Chan in the future. He could also use his status to force the emperor not to take concubines. But he could not use his power to force the emperor to love Bao Chan alone. The emperor looked around the hall and saw his sister glaring at the emperor of the Heavenly Dragon Empire. He suddenly had a thought. Under everyone's gaze, Long Qingfu coughed lightly and said with a smile, "Yongla is indebted to your majesty. But Yongla has been spoiled since she was young. I can't make the decision for her." Whether it was the officials of Tianlong or the officials of Qin Kingdom, they were all confused. What did this mean? Refuse? But it didn't seem like it. The one who reacted the fastest was Long Xiao. Almost as soon as Emperor Long Qing finished speaking, he said loudly, "Your Majesty, you mean that eldest Princess Yongla's marriage can be decided by herself? If eldest Princess Yongla agrees, will your Majesty agree?" Emperor Long Qing nodded. Long Xiao's words caused everyone's eyes to focus on Gu Xingyin again. Gu Xingyin secretly cursed him for being cunning. Long Xiao looked at her affectionately and said gently, "Eldest Princess Yongla, what do you think of this matter?" Gu Xingyin thought to herself, "I really want to refuse you and let you suffer the consequences of your own actions." But on the surface, she only stood up leisurely. Her gorgeous sleeves fluttered slightly, and her eyes turned. She was indescribably charming. Everyone in the hall stared at her with their eyes wide open. Beauties were like this. Even if it was an ordinary action, when she did it, she would have an indescribable charm compared to others. Gu Xingyin did not show the slightest shyness of being proposed to. She looked straight at Long Xiao without dodging and opened her mouth like the first cry of an oriole. Just now, Emperor Tianlong said that if you take me as your empress, I will be the only one in your harem. Long Xiao nodded without hesitation. Of course. Gu Xingyin pressed on. What if His Majesty breaks his promise? Long Xiao met her gaze and said firmly, that won't happen. Gu Xingyin pressed on. I have never believed in empty promises. Why don't you make an oath? If you go back on your word, I will return to the Qin kingdom in peace. How about it? These words were really shocking. It was rare for commoners to divorce, let alone the empress of a country. The ministers of Tianlong instinctively wanted to interrupt. Long Xiao stared at Gu Xingyin. He was not surprised to see a trace of provocation in her eyes. She said that on purpose to force him to give in. Chapter 1281. Long Xiao suddenly laughed out loud. He said in a clear voice, why not? Plop. Immediately, a courtier from Sky Dragon knelt down to Long Xiao. Your Majesty, you can't. This kind of thing, not to mention what would happen in the future, if it was spread out, others would only think that their emperor was blinded by lust and didn't know anything when he saw a beauty. Long Xiao ignored him and looked at Gu Xingyin instead. I can agree to this. I wonder what other conditions your highness has. The courtiers from Sky Dragon felt that they might need to see a doctor, while the courtiers from Qin Kingdom were full of pride. Their eldest princess was peerlessly beautiful. Their princess was mighty and domineering. Their princess couldn't be more handsome. Of course. Gu Xingyin slanted her eyes and roared, Your Majesty, don't tell me you think that I can be married to you so easily. Long Xiao was overjoyed. What did this mean? It was almost an agreement. As for the meaning of Gu Xingyin's words. Betrothal gifts. Give. Give. Long Xiao opened his mouth and said without hesitation, I am willing to give these two things. As betrothal gifts for marrying your Majesty. He raised his hand, and a servant behind him held a tray and presented it to Gu Xingyin. Everyone had a curious look on their faces. Even the Sky Dragon's envoys didn't know when their emperor had prepared these things. However, what could be on such a small tray? Gu Xingyin lifted the bright yellow silk on the tray. After seeing what was inside, her eyes narrowed. She covered the yellow silk in her hand again and looked at Long Xiao. Your Majesty, are you serious? Long Xiao laughed heartily, of course I am serious. Good. Gu Xingyin motioned for the servant to pass the things to Emperor Long Qing. Then I will wait for your Majesty in Qin Kingdom. After Gu Xingyin said this, she bowed to Emperor Long Qing. My sister is not feeling well. I will leave first. The courtiers were speechless. Is it really okay to lie through your teeth like this? Long Xiao looked at Gu Xingyin's back and did not say anything. When Emperor Long Qing saw what was on the tray, his hands trembled and he almost dropped the wine cup in his hand. He personally checked it carefully and found that he was not mistaken. This is the world's most advanced forging method, and even the blueprint of Sky Dragon's most advanced weapon. Emperor Long Qing felt that the thing in his hand was a little hot. He roughly understood why Bao Chan had agreed so decisively. Covering the things in his hands, Emperor Long Qing's smiling face became serious. Your Majesty Sky Dragon, are you serious? Long Xiao also restrained his expression. I've never played around. Emperor Long Qing sighed inwardly and finally raised his wine cup. Let us congratulate Qin Kingdom and Sky Dragon. Let us help each other and make a lasting friendship. Long Xiao raised the wine cup in his hand with a smile and drank it in one gulp. Although the courtiers did not understand what was going on between the two of them, they understood that the Emperor of Sky Dragon probably took out something extraordinary to make Qin Kingdom's attitude change so quickly. Everyone scratched their ears and cheeks and wanted to know what Sky Dragon took out. However, the people involved kept their mouths tightly shut about this matter. As soon as the banquet was over, Emperor Long Qin urgently summoned the courtiers of the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Works to the study to discuss matters. Chapter 1282. Are you really willing to let your sister marry to a place so far away? In the Empress Dowager's palace, the servants had all left. The Empress Dowager questioned the Emperor mercilessly. Emperor Long Qin didn't say anything. In fact, when he saw the two things that Sky Dragon took out, he knew that the marriage between the two countries was set. He couldn't let go of the opportunity to improve the strength of the whole Qin kingdom. He couldn't let go of it. Gu Xingyin sat quietly on the side. Every time she wanted to speak for Emperor Long Qin, the Empress Dowager gave her a cold stare, which made her have to shut up. Emperor Long Qin obviously knew the Empress Dowager's temper. He didn't say anything until the Empress Dowager finished venting. "Mother, The Empress Dowager said angrily, "Don't call me now." Emperor Long Qin looked at his sister helplessly. Gu Xingyin slowly walked to the Empress Dowager's side, took one of her hands, and shook it gently. "Mother." The Empress Dowager squinted at her. Gu Xingyin quickly said, "Don't blame my brother. I was willing to do this." The Empress Dowager actually knew what was going on. What happened in the court quickly spread to her ears. Of course, she also knew that her son put the choice in her daughter's hands. But, her daughter would soon be married and couldn't see. She couldn't bear to scold her, so she could only scold her son. Hearing Gu Xingyin's words, the Empress Dowager's tears finally fell. "My Baochan, why is her life so hard?" The Empress Dowager held Gu Xingyin tightly in her arms. Gu Xingyin sighed secretly and had to say slowly, "I don't feel wronged. He promised me so many conditions and promised that I would be the only one in the harem. Mother, I really don't feel wronged." The Empress Dowager's tears gradually stopped. Although the other party was very sincere, and the Empress Dowager knew that the princess of the royal family was born with more responsibilities than others, she was still very reluctant when it came to her daughter. She had been holding her daughter in the palm of her hand for more than 10 years. He was about to follow the others to a completely unfamiliar place. If it were in the Qin kingdom, anywhere, the Empress Dowager would have the confidence to take care of her daughter. But in Sky Dragon, even if her Baochan was wronged, she might not even know. Gu Xingyin gently leaned her head on the Empress Dowager's shoulder and said softly, "Mother, don't worry. Your daughter will live a happy life." This was something she was sure of. That man would never let her down. On this side, the Empress Dowager's palace, which was specially used to entertain the heavenly dragon, was also in an uproar. The Tianlong officials who had come with Long Shao only found out what their emperor had sacrificed in order to marry the eldest princess of the Qin kingdom after they returned from the banquet. The most advanced forging method. The blueprint for the weapon with the most destructive power. No wonder the Qin emperor had such an expression. Those ministers felt that their majesty was not marrying an empress, but inviting an ancestor back, right? There were also some ministers who wanted to go further. Their emperor cared too much about this eldest princess of the Qin kingdom. The loyalty of an emperor was not a good sign. Chapter 1283. Long Shao frowned as he listened to the official's earnest admonishment. Some even boldly took out the example of the previous dynasty's monarch's favored concubine. Pa! The crisp sound of a cup breaking rang out, startling everyone. Enough! Long Shao shouted in a deep voice. I never need others to comment on what I do. If you have the free time to pay attention to my private affairs, why don't you spend some time on your own affairs? Every one of you is pointing fingers at my decisions. Do you think that you can be a better emperor than me? With these words, all the officials in the room knelt down. For a moment, there was complete silence. Long Xiao said in his heart, this bunch of fellows just wouldn't be satisfied if they didn't make him angry. He listened and tolerated them nicely, but they were going to take a mile after taking an inch. When he was really angry, these officials who had just been making impassioned speeches were all trembling with fear. I sincerely want to marry eldest Princess Yongle. What are you trying to do by obstructing me? If I hear even the slightest bit of bad rumors about the eldest princess outside, do as you deem fit, Long Xiao said coldly. Cold sweat seeped out of the foreheads of the officials present. His Majesty was so protective of his food that he could not even hear the slightest rumor about the future empress. No matter what the officials of Tianlong thought, and no matter how reluctant the Empress Dowager of Qin was, this matter was settled. As the noble eldest princess of Qin, Gu Xingyin naturally could not just casually follow them to Tianlong. The Tianlong emissaries would first return to the country, and then on a date set by both sides, they would send a grand wedding procession to welcome their future empress of Tianlong back. The night before the Tianlong emissaries left, Gu Xingyin and Long Xiao met. You're amazing. You've made me go in circles. Gu Xingyin snorted coldly. Her expression was very calm, and there was no joy or anger in her tone. Long Xiao could not guess what she was thinking for a moment. This was also the first time the two of them met in the hall. It was also the first time the two of them met after his true identity was exposed. Long Xiao was a little helpless. I can be sure that I have never played you. Bao Chan, he called out her name softly. I've never lied to you. He was just hiding some things. Gu Xingyin was silent. She thought about it carefully and realized that it was true. Long Xiao even told him that Xiao Xiao was not his real name before he left. Gu Xingyin regained her senses and looked at him. You spent so much to marry me. Aren't you afraid that others will call you a fatuous ruler? Long Xiao smiled. How can I stop someone else's mouth from growing? As for whether he is a fatuous ruler or not, time will prove it. Gu Xingyin snorted. I don't care if others call you a fatuous ruler or not. I just feel that I'm going to become a femme fatale. Long Xiao's face immediately became serious. Bao Chan, don't worry. It doesn't matter what others say about me. If anyone dares to talk bad about you, they must be tired of talking. Gu Xingyin was speechless. Where did this guy learn these sweet nothings from? She was happy in her heart, but she just pretended to snort casually. Unexpectedly, she felt a warmth behind her, and a warm body approached her. I really miss you, Bao Chan. Chapter 1284. Perhaps because he knew Gu Xingyin's bottom line, Long Xiao did not hug her directly. He only stood closely behind her. The two of them did not touch at all, but they were very close. Gu Xingyin could even feel his breath on her ear when he spoke. Gu Xingyin did not speak. Long Xiao did not seem to expect her answer. He said to himself, since the last time we met, I have been thinking about you since I returned to Tianlong. Every day, I have been thinking about Bao Chan. Gu Xingyin pursed her lips and did not say anything. Long Xiao continued, after taking control of the situation in the dynasty, I immediately made the decision to go to Qing. All the officials stopped me, saying that this was too rash and dangerous, but I still insisted on coming. Because I really wanted to see you. Then, as I said, the next time we meet, I will tell you my real name. My name is Long Xiao. Gu Xingyin quietly listened to his words and suddenly asked, have you ever thought about what if I don't agree to your proposal, or if I already have someone I like? Long Xiao paused and then said, I have enough confidence that no country can refuse the betrothal gifts I take out. Gu Xingyin was silent. Indeed, the two things that Long Xiao took as betrothal gifts could not be measured by their value. Not to mention the eldest princess, even 10 princesses might not be worth their value. If I am really rejected. Long Xiao paused. Then I will be a bandit and take my empress back. Gu Xingyin raised her head because of these words. She really did not expect Long Xiao to say such a thing. Don't joke. Long Xiao only smiled and did not say anything. He said that he would never lie to her or joke in front of her. If Qin was really unwilling to marry the eldest princess to Tianlong, he might really use force to solve the problem. It's getting late. You should go back, Gu Xingyin suddenly said. Long Xiao was a little reluctant, but he also knew that it was not suitable for him to stay here for long. Just as he was about to leave, his gaze suddenly froze as if he had seen something inconceivable. Gu Xingyin didn't hear a reply, so she turned around in confusion. Then, she felt something move around her neck, and a jade pendant hidden under her robe was taken out. Long Xiao's eyes suddenly became pleasantly surprised. He looked at Gu Xingyin with shining eyes. Bao Chan, you have been wearing it all this time. Gu Xingyin, how did he see it? He had kept it so secretively. She maintained an indifferent expression on her face. I just feel that this jade pendant is not bad. It suits my clothes today. An uncontrollable smile spread from the corner of Long Xiao's mouth, and the corners of his eyes and brows were full of smiles. He glanced at Gu Xingyin and felt that he shouldn't expose the excuse she had found in her panic. Her clothes today clearly did not suit this jade pendant. Long Xiao walked in front of Gu Xingyin. When Gu Xingyin was caught off guard, he wrapped his arm around her waist. What are you doing? Gu Xingyin was shocked. Unexpectedly, the other party only hugged her for a moment before letting go. A farewell hug. Bao Chan, wait for me to welcome you back to Tianlong. A warm touch touched her forehead and flashed by. It was so fast that she almost thought it was an illusion. Chapter 1285. The envoys from Sky Dragon finally left. But the whole palace was busy because of this. They had to start preparing for Princess Yongla's wedding. Princess Yongla's status was already first class, and this time she was going to Sky Dragon to become the queen of a country. The Empress Dowager loved her daughter, so she was picky and at least doubled the dowry that she had prepared. Emperor Long Qing also felt sorry for his sister, so he could only make up for it with the dowry. All kinds of rare treasures were put into Gu Xingyin's palace. It was said that when the officials from the Ministry of Rites counted the dowry of Princess Yongla, they even suspected that she had emptied the palace's treasury. Everyone was busy, especially the servants who were going to follow Gu Xingyin to Sky Dragon. Only Gu Xingyin, the main character, had the most leisure time. There was someone to do everything for her. The only thing that made her unhappy was that from time to time some noble ladies would look at her with pity, as if it was a terrible and sad thing for her to marry into Sky Dragon. Gu Xingyin didn't want to go again after attending 2 banquets in the capital. She was really fed up with those self-righteous eyes. Anyway, her status was high enough. If she didn't want to go, she could just reject it. There was no need to find any reason. In this very boring situation, Gu Xingyin finally remembered the mission goal that she had forgotten. Speaking of which, she hadn't seen Ing Qi since she was taken away by the shadow guards. At first, the system would dutifully report her recent situation. Every time, it was nothing more than what the shadow guards had done to her and what she had become. Later, Gu Xingyin simply told the system that if Ing Qi didn't do anything strange, it didn't need to tell her these things. It affected her appetite. It was true. The shadow guards' interrogation methods were really clever. Sometimes, just hearing the description made Gu Xingyin feel a little scared. Ing Yi, take me to see her. Ing Yi was a little hesitant. Gu Xingyin asked, is there a problem? Ing Qi bowed and said, it's Ing Qi. Her current appearance is a little unsightly. Was he afraid that he would be scared? Gu Xingyin waved her hand. It doesn't matter. Let's go and have a look. Ing Yi took Gu Xingyin to a dark room. This dark room was very big, but it was very dark. There were only a few lonely oil lamps with bean-sized flames. Against the cold gleam of some of the torture instruments, it was rather eerie. Gu Xingyin slowly walked in. Her long and gorgeous dress dragged on the ground, becoming the only light in this dark room. It was a cage like a small iron house. Most of them were empty. When they arrived at one of the small iron houses, Ying Yi made a gesture, and a shadow guard in the same gray clothes opened the door. In the dim light, Gu Xingyin could see a skinny figure lying in the corner of the small iron house. If it weren't for the occasional twitching of her body, she would look like a lifeless corpse. Gu Xingyin looked at her quietly. Just from her back, even she couldn't recognize that this was the Ying Qi who looked exactly like her. Ying Yi stood beside Gu Xingyin and said, "Ying Qi, master is here." The figure slowly moved and then raised her head. Gu Xingyin sucked in a sharp breath. This face, how did this face become like this? Chapter 1286. It wasn't a deliberate disfigurement, but Ying Qi's current face was really difficult to describe. If one looked closely, it seemed that her facial features were still the same as before, but if one looked a little more closely, they would feel that something was wrong. His entire face was like a different face. His facial features were forced to be put together, making people feel that it was not real at all. It was a little scary. Moreover, the skin on her face had begun to fall off in some places. Gu Xingyin looked at this face with some surprise, suddenly thinking of the medicine she had given Ying Qi. Yes, the substitute needed to maintain the exact same figure and appearance as the master, so the white jade pill could not be stopped. If it was stopped, the backlash from the body was not a joke. Ying Qi seemed to be even a little confused, but the moment she saw Gu Xingyin, she sobered up. She almost screamed at Gu Xingyin, "Who are you? Who are you? How dare you pretend to be the imperial palace?" Gu Xingyin was silent. She turned her head to look at Ying Yi, who had his head down. "What's the matter with her?" Ying Yi didn't dare to raise his head, reporting to master, "Ying Qi couldn't bear the punishment of the shadow guards and has gone crazy." Crazy? This was unexpected by Gu Xingyin. As a shadow guard, they had received all kinds of special training from an early age, so their willpower was quite amazing. Gu Xingyin didn't believe that Ying Qi would go crazy so easily. She didn't step forward, but stayed beside Ying Yi and quietly asked, "Who are you? Who am I?" Ying Qi was still lying on the ground. Hearing this question, she seemed puzzled, but soon straightened up and her face became reserved. "This princess is the most respected Princess Yongla of the Qin kingdom." Ying Qi didn't know that this kind of attitude, coupled with her strange face, was really unbearable to look at. However, among the only two people in the audience, Ying Yi lowered his head and didn't dare to make a sound, while Gu Xingyin had no interest in talking to her. "Have someone bring a mirror," Gu Xingyin said to Ying Yi. "Yes." Ying Yi didn't understand what his master wanted to do, but he still dutifully blew a whistle. Soon, someone came over. Gu Xingyin took the mirror that had just been delivered and threw it directly in front of Ying Qi. "Ying Qi, take a look in the mirror and see what you look like now. Who would think that you are the noble eldest Princess Yongla when they see you?" Ying Qi saw the mirror and quieted down. Her slightly blackened fingers fumbled for the mirror on the ground, and then her face appeared in the mirror. Pa! The next moment, the mirror smashed against the metal wall and shattered. "No, no, no, this isn't me, this isn't me, this isn't me, this isn't me." Ying Qi seemed to be on the verge of collapse as he shouted desperately. She shouted for a while and wanted to pick up the mirror again to take another look. However, the mirror had already been smashed by her and could no longer reflect anything. Her hands groped on the ground anxiously, piecing together several mirror fragments. She wanted to see her own appearance again, and she didn't even care that there were several bloody cuts on her hands. Gu Xingyin looked on coldly from the side. "Ying Qi, This princess doesn't care if you are really crazy or not, it has no meaning to me, and it has no meaning to you. Because in this life, don't even think about escaping revenge. Chapter 1287. The movements of Ying Qi's hands slowly stopped. However, she still ignored Gu Xingyin. Just like before, she sat there with her head lowered, as if she had completely ignored the two people in front of her. Gu Xingyin glanced at Ying Yi and said, "Let's go." Ying Yi nodded silently and the metal lock was once again locked, restoring the place to silence. After Gu Xingyin and the others had walked for a long time, and not a single sound of footsteps could be heard anymore, Ying Qi suddenly grabbed the mirror fragment on the ground and was about to wipe it across her neck. Ding! A copper coin flew out of nowhere and hit Ying Qi's hand that was holding the mirror fragment. Her hand loosened and the fragment fell to the ground. A deep voice came from the darkness, "Ying Qi, Master didn't say you were going to die, so don't even think about it." Soon, a grey-robed figure appeared from the darkness and cleaned up the broken pieces and other things in the iron prison. Out of the dark prison, Gu Xingyin breathed a sigh of relief. The atmosphere inside was too depressing. Ying Qi's face makes me uncomfortable, Gu Xingyin said with a frown. Ying Yi nodded, indicating that he understood. Ying Qi's face didn't matter anymore. You also know that in a few days, I will be going to Sky Dragon City. When the time comes, you will definitely be coming with me. Gu Xingyin said faintly, as for Ying Qi, deal with her quickly. Remember, don't let her live too happily. If she's happy, I won't be happy. Ying Yi bowed his head, yes. In fact, he didn't know why his master was so against Ying Qi. Their master's personality, to be honest, could be said to be soft-hearted, treating the shadow guards with compassion, but when it came to the matter of Ying Qi, he was ruthless to the point of making them bristle with anger. If it were up to him, Ying Qi, who was disloyal, he would have just killed her, why bother torturing her? In the eyes of those who didn't know, Ying Qi was just a subordinate with bad intentions. Little did they know that she had once succeeded. Gu Xingyin could not tell anyone about this. Shadow One was very efficient. That night, Gu Xingyin received a system notification. Ying Qi's eyes were gouged out, his tongue was cut off, his ears were disabled, his limbs were broken, and his entire face was peeled off while he was still alive. Unfortunately, her life was being kept alive by someone using top-notch medicinal herbs. Even if she wanted to die, she couldn't. Within half a month, a terrifying beggar appeared on the streets of the capital. If she was an ordinary beggar, some kind-hearted people would give her some money and food. However, this person was truly too frightening. Under his messy hair was a hideous face with scars that blurred his facial features. Many children were scared to tears. Many commoners threw vegetable leaves and rotten eggs at her, wanting to chase away this terrifying beggar. Even though this beggar couldn't move, there would always be someone who would force-feed her in the middle of the night so that she wouldn't starve to death. Ying Qi finally understood what it meant to live a life worse than death, and what it meant to beg for death. Compared to today, the days in the dark prison were simply heaven, not to mention when she was still her master's substitute. She regretted it, she really regretted it. But at this time, what was the use of regretting it? She could only hide in a dark corner every day, waiting for the day when her master would be in a good mood and show her mercy. He wanted to let himself die a quick death. Chapter 1288. The next year, when the hot summer passed and the leaves began to turn yellow, the messengers of Tianlong came to Daqing again. But it was different from the last time. This time, they came to welcome their empress. Long Xiao still followed. The emperor of Tianlong came to Daqing for the second time to show his love for his empress. On this day, Emperor Long Qing and the Empress Dowager personally sent Gu Xingyin's carriage out of the city gate. At the city gate, Gu Xingyin, dressed in a red dress, got out of the carriage with the help of her maids. She kowtowed 3 times to the Empress Dowager and Emperor Longqing. The Empress Dowager held back the tears that were about to flow out and helped her up with a smile. Emperor Longqing's eyes were also red. He raised his sister like a daughter. How could he bear to let her go at this moment? Moreover, in his heart, Bao Qian married for Daqing. Emperor Longqing did not think that Gu Xingyin really chose to marry Long Xiao because she liked him. Gu Xingyin, it was a beautiful misunderstanding. The auspicious time has come. Long Xiao got off the horse and walked to Gu Xingyin. Let's go. Gu Xingyin lowered her head slightly and walked toward the carriage. Long Xiao looked at the Empress Dowager and Emperor Longqing in front of him and bowed to them. He ignored their shocked gazes and said to himself, Imperial Mother and Big Brother, please don't worry. I will definitely take good care of Bao Qian and not let her suffer any grievances. After he finished, he bowed again and turned to walk toward the carriage. The Empress Dowager and Emperor Longqing looked at each other and saw a trace of relief in each other's eyes. The Emperor of Tianlong could put down his status and bow to them. It showed that he really cared about Bao Qian in his heart. Otherwise, there was no need for him to put on an act in front of everyone at this point. I hope he can really do what he said. In the 2nd year of Bao Yuan, Emperor Tianzi went to Daqing in person and married Empress Minghui. In the 9th month of the same year, Celestial Empress got married in the palace. The emperor was overjoyed and pardoned the world. In the 4th year of Bao Yuan, there was an official who advised Tianzi Emperor to expand his harem on the grounds that the empress had been in the palace for 2 years and had no children. Tianzi Emperor was enraged and rebuked in front of the court. When I asked for the empress' hand in marriage, I made a vow that I would only have the empress in my harem. By forcing me to take in a concubine, are you forcing me to become a person who doesn't keep my promises? His intentions are worthy of death. At that time, the 9 ministers who had knelt down and begged Tianzi Emperor to take in a concubine were all stripped of their official positions and would never be employed again. After that, no one dared to talk about this in the imperial court. In the 5th year of Bao Yuan, Celestial Empress was diagnosed with pregnancy and the entire nation celebrated. On the 6th day of the 6th month in the 6th year of Bao Yuan, Emperor and Empress gave birth to a son in Chao Huang Palace. Emperor was overjoyed and named him Chao. Time was a wonderful thing. It could make many people accustomed to things that they thought were impossible. For example, the people of Sky Dragon City all knew that their emperor and empress were deeply in love with each other. They were like a normal couple, and no one else could come between them. What? You don't believe me? You say that all emperors have 3 palaces and 6 courtyards. Haha, have you heard of the Chao Huang Palace, which is even more magnificent than the emperor's bedroom? That was the residence that His Majesty had specially built for the empress. Have you heard of the Tenli peach blossom forest in the palace? Sky Dragon City's climate was not suitable for peach blossoms to grow. His Majesty had gathered hundreds of gardeners and racked their brains for hundreds of days and nights before finally finding a way to let peach blossoms grow in Sky Dragon City. Because, the Empress loved peach blossoms the most. Chapter 1289. Today was the grand wedding of Qi Manor's heir, and there were many guests in Qi Manor. Princess Duan Yun was dressed in brocade and was surrounded by countless women, enjoying the compliments of these people to her heart's content. Because she was the princess of the Celestial Empress, the most distinguished woman in this banquet. Your Highness, you look really good in this red cloud satin. A noblewoman beside her smiled and complimented. Another noblewoman was not to be outdone and quickly said, of course, only Your Highness can afford to wear red cloud satin. It is said that this is a tribute, but we have never seen it before. The people around him immediately echoed his sentiments. Princess Duan Yun smiled reservedly, as though she didn't take these compliments to heart. At this moment, someone among the women said, speaking of red cloud satin, I have seen eldest Princess Yongla wear it once. She is truly a fairy that has descended to the mortal world. The bustling banquet fell silent for a moment because of this special name. The smile on Princess Duan Yun's face also disappeared. She looked around, and many people lowered their heads. Just now, there were too many people talking, so she didn't know who mentioned eldest Princess Yongle. This name seemed to have become a tacit taboo in this capital city. Princess Duan Yun said lazily, "I will take a walk in the garden." After speaking, she didn't look at everyone's reaction and left with the help of the maid. Princess Duan Yun was very unhappy. The reason for her unhappiness was that she didn't know who said, "Eldest Princess Yongle," just now. She didn't like this aunt since she was young. The two of them were about the same age, so they should have a very good relationship. However, she was the princess of the Celestial Empress, the true proud daughter of the heavens. As long as the princess of the imperial family was mentioned, the first name that came to everyone's mind would only be eldest Princess Yongle. Eldest Princess Yongle's rank was higher than hers, she was prettier than her, and she was more favored than her. All the benefits in this world were taken by her. How could Princess Duan Yun accept this? Fortunately, so what if her aunt was favored? In the end, wasn't she still used as a tool for a marriage alliance and married to another country? It was said that the emperor said that he wouldn't have a harem. However, what right did an empress who was far away and had no one to rely on have? Princess Duan Yun sneered. Her aunt had been in the limelight for more than 10 years, but in terms of marriage, she was far inferior to her. She had a good relationship with the prince consort. When she gave birth to the child, she generously let the servant girl by her side serve the prince consort. Who in the aristocratic family didn't praise her for being virtuous? In the princess's residence, who would dare to go against his will? As she thought of this, her mood became much better. At this moment, a palace servant trotted in front of her. "Your Highness, there is a decree from the palace for you to return to the palace." Princess Duan Yun was puzzled. What was so urgent? But she didn't dare to tarry. She hurriedly informed her master and rode a horse and carriage into the palace. The palace servant led her directly to Imperial Grandmother's palace. Before she reached the palace, Princess Duan Yun heard a burst of laughter. Princess Duan Yun felt strange in her heart. Ever since Aunt Yongle got married, she rarely saw a smile on Imperial Grandmother's face. Thinking of this, she asked the palace servant to report and walked in herself. As soon as she entered the hall, her gaze was attracted by the woman who was dressed like a woman sitting next to her Imperial Grandmother. Time seemed to treat her exceptionally well and didn't leave any traces on her body. No, there were still traces. She, who was already a married woman, had lost her immaturity. Compared to back then, she had a trace of charm. Princess Duan Yun's eyes widened. Aunt Yongle, why was she here? Chapter 1290. The people in the palace also saw Princess Duan Yun who had just entered. The empress, who was sitting below, saw her daughter and quickly said, "Duan Yun, come and greet your Aunt Yongle." Princess Duan Yun came back to her senses. She took 2 steps forward and bowed to Gu Shengyin. When she lowered her head, she saw the man sitting next to her father. Princess Duan Yun was shocked. She was a princess of the royal family. Although she was shocked, she didn't lose her composure. After Princess Duan Yun bowed, she sat quietly next to her mother. Only then did she have the chance to look at the man. The more she looked, the more shocked Princess Duan Yun was. Back then, the Emperor of Tianlong personally came to the Qin kingdom to ask for Aunt Yongle's hand in marriage. Of course, she had seen the Emperor of Tianlong at that time. Although many years had passed, some people's unique demeanor would be unforgettable after seeing it once. Why would the Emperor of Tianlong and Aunt Yongle, who was already the Empress, appear here? Princess Duan Yun was full of doubts. Finally, she found an opportunity to go to the washroom and ask her mother. "Why is Aunt Yongle here?" When the Empress heard this, she had a complicated expression on her face. She seemed to find it hard to understand and also had a trace of envy. She opened her mouth and said, "Duanyan, after seeing your Aunt Yongla, Mother realized that some people are born to be envied." Her tone had a trace of emotion. This time, the Emperor of Tianlong was afraid that your aunt would miss her hometown, so he accompanied her back to the Qin kingdom to see your grandmother and father. The Empress wiped her hands with a clean silk handkerchief and finished her last sentence. Imperial Mother once thought that being able to sit in this position was already the pinnacle of women in the world. But Imperial Mother knows that Imperial Mother has never had a place in your Imperial Father's heart. Your Aunt Yongla is the one who has truly reached the peak of what a woman can achieve. Princess Duanyan silently held the Empress' hand and walked out. Dinner was eaten in the Empress Dowager's palace. This time, Gu Xingyin and Long Xiao didn't make a big fuss. They didn't want to be too ostentatious. Only the Empress Dowager, the Emperor-Empress, and a few princes and princesses were eating together. In such an occasion, even if it was Princess Duan-yun, she could only sit below. Eat a little more and drink a bowl of soup, okay? Even Ah Chao eats more than you. Although Long Xiao frowned, his tone was extremely gentle. Gu Xingyin was silent for 2 seconds. In the end, she still took the soup from him. Last bowl. She looked very unhappy. Long Xiao's eyebrows curved. Okay. She looked on silently. Her uncle, who was the ruler of a country, really only had eyes for her aunt. He didn't care about the gazes of others at all. He knew all of his aunt's favorite dishes, and he would even personally pick up food and ladle soup for his aunt. All kinds of intimacy made her, a mother, blush uncontrollably. Apart from her red face, all that was left was an indescribable sense of loss. In her entire life, it was probably true that she could not compare to her aunt in any way. Seeing this scene, the Empress Dowager and the Emperor finally felt relieved. Although Gu Xingyin would send letters regularly, they always felt uneasy if they didn't see it with their own eyes. They were afraid that she would not have a good life in Tianlong. They were afraid that she would have no one to complain to when she was wronged. Now, the Empress Dowager felt that she could finally feel at ease. Some things could be pretended, but some things could not be pretended. Her Baochan was living a happy life. Chapter 1291. In the dark alleyway, a bright light flashed like a bolt of lightning, illuminating the dark alleyway for a moment. At the moment when the light lit up, if someone was here, they would see that something ferocious flew up with the light. Gu Xingyin stood there expressionlessly as he watched the demonic creature's body turn into ashes. By tomorrow morning, there would be nothing left here. She lowered her head slightly, and the long sword in her hand disappeared in an instant and integrated into her body in a way that defied scientific common sense. However, if even monsters appeared, what else was impossible? Tonight's mission was completed. Gu Xingyin wore her inconspicuous t-shirt and jeans and walked towards her home. In this world, her identity was not simple at all, an exorcist. A profession that sounded very high and mighty from the name, and in fact, what it did was also very high and mighty. The modern city was full of luxury, and behind the prosperity, was the constant breeding of human desires. Those desires were invisible and traceless, but they wandered in every corner of the city. Once enough evil thoughts were absorbed, these desires would be able to take shape. These shape-shifted existences only had a preliminary appetite and did not have a complete ability to think. To put it in modern terms, they were all very strong and mentally retarded. As for the appearance of these monsters, as monsters formed by absorbing evil thoughts, their appearance could be imagined. Ugly. This was Gu Xingyin's description of them. For ordinary people, these monsters that were almost unafraid of physical attacks were simply monsters that were difficult to resist. Therefore, the profession of exorcist came into being. There were many kinds of exorcist predecessors. Among the first exorcists, there were accomplished masters of Buddhism, reclusive Taoist masters, and some powerful feng shui sorcerers. Later, when the monsters were rampant, these people realized that it was difficult to resist so many monsters with their strength alone. Therefore, the powerful state machinery began to operate. The government directly established a special department for exorcism, headed by several highly respected masters, to find talented people all over the country and let them join this special profession. Of course, the existence of exorcists was still a secret of the country. Even the existence of the demons was concealed by the country. Otherwise, if they found out that there was such a terrifying monster in the world they lived in, it would easily cause panic among the people. The body that Gu Xingyin came to was Jiang Lan. She was 23 years old this year. On the surface, she was the owner of an ordinary flower shop, but in fact, she was the most talented among the young exorcists of this generation. During the day, she would lie lazily in her little flower shop and take an afternoon nap. At night, this girl with lazy eyebrows would transform into a female Azura that was even more attractive than a demon. Jiang Lan had no parents and no siblings. She was born with the fate of being a cursed star. Such a person was born with few family ties, but in terms of cultivation, she was the best seedling. The one who taught Jiang Lan was a Buddhist master. That master liked her very much, but he didn't dare to accept her as a disciple. She was a cursed loner. Not only did she have a weak relationship with her relatives, anyone who got close to her would not have a good ending. Even so, the master died in an accidental explosion when Jiang Lan was 17 years old. The master had been benevolent all his life. He should have lived a perfect life. From then on, Jiang Lan knew that she was an inauspicious person. Chapter 1314, A Special Commemoration. Chapter 1292. She began to consciously alienate herself from everyone around her. Not many people knew that she was a heavenly cursed lone star. Those colleagues all said that the very powerful Jiang Lan was an extremely arrogant person to the bone. Although she smiled faintly to everyone, no one had ever appeared beside her. When Jiang Lan heard this rumor, he didn't care about it and allowed it to spread. Over time, no one really paid attention to Jiang Lan. Only one person. Yan Zi was also an exorcist who became famous at a young age, but she was always suppressed by Jiang Lan. Yan Zi was beautiful and cheerful. She was like a goddess in the entire special department. Her only regret was that she was always inferior to Jiang Lan in the mission assessment. She always thought that Jiang Lan didn't like her and was targeting her. She didn't know that if Jiang Lan really wanted to target her, she only needed to deliberately get close to her. Those who were close to the heavenly calamitous lone star would be unlucky at best, and even lose their lives at worst. Yan Zi didn't know, so she always provoked Jiang Lan. Her life goal was to defeat Jiang Lan and become the #1 exorcist of the younger generation. But unfortunately, until Jiang Lan died, she didn't succeed. How did Jiang Lan die? Once, she received a mission where an extremely powerful monster was about to be born. She needed to destroy the monster before it was fully awakened. But she didn't know who leaked the news, and this mission was also known by Yan Zi. She went to the monster's lair in front of Jiang Lan. How powerful was that monster? Even Jiang Lan had to prepare a lot of things in advance before she was ready to set off. How could Yan Zi, who rushed over excitedly when she heard the news, be its opponent? When Jiang Lan arrived there, what she saw was Yan Zi dying under the monster's claws. Although Jiang Lan didn't like Yan Zi very much, she couldn't watch her die in the monster's hands. She saved Yan Zi, and because of that, she was hit by the monster's claws. However, he didn't expect to see Yan Zi leave without even looking back when he was on the verge of death after killing the monster. Jiang Lan died there due to excessive blood loss. She didn't have to die. As long as Yan Zi applied medicine to her wound at that time, or made an emergency call for her. Or perhaps, she would let Yan Zi die in the monster's lair. If she hadn't been injured while trying to save Yan Zi, she wouldn't have had such a hard time. But there were no ifs. So Jiang Lan died and Gu Xingyin came here. Jiang Lan was a genius. This was not only reflected in her talent for cultivation, but also in her wisdom. Before she went to complete this mission, she had already begun to develop a magic absorption array. It was a formation that could absorb people's evil thoughts. As long as he succeeded, it would be equivalent to breaking the foundation of those monsters. It was a pity that she was dead. Her belongings had not been carefully organized. The fruits of her painstaking efforts over the past few years had quietly turned into ashes along with her corpse in the flames. When Jiang Lan's body was cremated, Yan Zi cried herself to the point of losing her voice. The surrounding people were surprised that Yan Zi and Jiang Lan had such a good relationship. Seeing this, Gu Xingyin sneered. Good relationship? No matter what Yan Zi was thinking when she turned her head and left, it was impossible for her not to know what Jiang Lan's situation was at that time. It was also impossible for her not to know that Jiang Lan was likely to die. She still left. In other words, at least at that moment, she wanted Jiang Lan to die. Chapter 1293. She was the one who had indirectly caused Jiang Lan's death. Who was she trying to impress by acting so heartbroken? When Gu Xingyin came to this world, the master who had taught her many things had already left this world. She had also become the arrogant and unreasonable Jiang Lan that her colleagues spoke of. That was good. Gu Xingyin thought. Jiang Lan did not need friends. She was destined to be alone for the rest of her life. But, thinking of the man who would come to her side in every life, Gu Xingyin's eyes flashed. But in this life, she was destined to let him down. Unless she died, there was no solution for her being a jinx. Gu Xingyin lazily lay on the deck chair in her little flower shop. Her shop was in a good location and the surrounding environment was not bad, but very few people came to buy flowers. Of course, there was a reason. Every room had its own special qi. It was a very mysterious thing that could not be seen with the naked eye. People would often say that the aura of someone they did not like did not match. This was a kind of qi. With Gu Xingyin, the jinx, around, most people would subconsciously feel a sense of rejection when they passed by. There were also a few flower shops around, so people would naturally not choose her shop. No one. Instead, it was what Gu Xingyin wanted. She did not rely on this to make a living. She was just looking for something to kill time on the surface. Ding-ling, the wind chime hanging on the glass door rang. Gu Xingyin subconsciously looked up and frowned. What was she doing here? She did not get up and continued to lie down lazily. The woman who walked in was wearing a low-cut V-neck tight top, perfectly showing off her perfect figure. Her lower body was wearing the same tight leather pants. Her long legs were straight and slender. She was wearing a pair of super black sunglasses, orange wavy hair, and flaming red lips. She was definitely someone who could attract half the attention. But Gu Xingyin was not interested in these at all. What are you doing here? Her attitude was not very friendly. I knew you were sleeping in here again, the woman who came in said with a smile. Gu Xingyin frowned again. Something was wrong. In the original plot, Yan Zi and Jiang Lan were not so close. She asked indifferently, tell me, what is your purpose in coming here? The smile on Yan Zi's face froze for a moment before returning to normal. Can't I look for you if there's nothing? After all, you're the top exorcist in our department. You're the idol of many people. Gu Xingyin glanced at her. That won't be the target of your worship. Yan Zi had always treated Jiang Lan as an opponent, not an idol. Yan Zi sighed. Jiang Lan, I admit that I wasn't very friendly to you in the past. I was even a little childish and willful. I've already reflected on my actions. Jiang Lan, I want to be friends with you. What was this woman up to this time? Gu Xingyin looked at her strangely and refused without hesitation. No need. I, Jianlan, never need friends. Yan Zi let out a low sigh. If there's nothing else, please leave. Gu Xingyin ordered her to leave. Yan Zi's expression did not change. She said with a smile, "Who said I'm free? I'm here to buy flowers. Boss Jiang, there's no reason for you to leave, right? Okay, 500 per pot. Pick whatever you want." Gu Xingyin raised her eyebrows and said. Her flower shop was filled with small potted plants that were not worth much. 51 pots was already a high price. Gu Xingyin's original intention was to let Yan Zi back off. Unexpectedly, Yan Zi's expression did not change at all. Okay. Gu Xingyin was speechless. There must be something wrong with this woman. Chapter 1294. Jiang Lan's flower shop wasn't big, and there weren't many treasures, but Yan Zi picked things very slowly. Gu Xingyin looked at the time and saw that half an hour had passed. She was getting impatient and urged her, "Take your time, I'm going to sleep first." She didn't sleep last night, and the sun was just right now. It was the best time to sleep, but Yan Zi had to disturb her. Yan Zi turned her head, and the sun shone through the glass door onto Gu Xingyin's face, who was lying on the recliner. In her memory, Jiang Lan's face had always been pale. Looking at her under the sun, she actually felt transparent. She looked a little tired, and it seemed that she was really tired. "I'm done," she replied. The other party didn't even open her eyes. "Leave the money on the cashier, I won't send you off." She was still the same, and she didn't care about anyone. Yan Zi smiled bitterly, took out a stack of cash, and put it on the cashier, and pressed it with a small paper. Yan Zi went out with 2 childish potted plants in her arms, and came to her car. A few people looked at her enviously, and 2 handsome men with good taste in clothes came up to talk to her. Yan Zi politely refused and drove back to her villa. There was a red light in front. Yan Zi waited for the red light while thinking about Jiang Lan just now. She had always been like this, whether it was now, or 2 years later. Yes, 2 years later. Yan Zi didn't know why she had returned to a few years ago when she woke up. Maybe God looked at her with too much guilt, so he was especially kind. No matter what, now that she was back, she had a chance to make up for some things. She always remembered that after Jiang Lan's death, she began to dream every night. She dreamed that Jiang Lan was lying there dying, and then she left without hesitation. She dreamed that Jiang Lan came to her in the middle of the night, covered in blood, and asked her why she didn't save her. She dreamed that she was torn to pieces by a demon, and Jiang Lan left without looking back. Even if she became the most powerful exorcist, and could destroy the most powerful demon, she couldn't get rid of the demon in her heart. She could never get rid of this dream. For a very long time, Yan Zi had been wondering why he had chosen to leave at that time. She had never thought of herself as an evil person, but she had once taken a life on her hands. Perhaps at that critical moment, her jealousy won over her morality, and she made the biggest mistake in her life. The car in front had already started moving, and Yan Zi also recovered from her memories. Yan Zi looked at the 2 small potted plants at the side and a smile appeared on her face. It didn't matter. For now, those were things that hadn't happened yet. She could start over with Jiang Lan. Thinking about it carefully, she and Jiang Lan didn't have to be opponents. They could be partners, and they could also be friends. The first friend of the number 1 exorcist, Jiang Lan, who had always been indifferent, sounded very cool, didn't it? Gu Xingyin didn't know why Yan Zi had such a deviation. She was still chatting with the system. "Tell me, should I make the first move and find a chance to trick that yen?" The system. Host, the system can't sense the target's hatred for the host. Please reconsider. Gu Xingyin, no hatred. What was wrong with this development? Chapter 1295. Gu Xingyin was a little confused. Sleepiness came over her, and she prepared to sleep first. However, before she could fall asleep, the wind chime rang again. Gu Xingyin was a little puzzled. What's wrong with today? Usually, no one would come to her flower shop for half a month. Excuse me, are you Miss Jianglan? The man was dressed in a suit and leather shoes. He was very well dressed, but his attitude towards Gu Xingyin was very humble. Gu Xingyin raised her eyebrows in surprise. Are you buying flowers? The man was speechless. He smiled and said, I'm here to look for the exorcist Miss Jianglan, not the flower shop owner Miss Jianglan. Oh. Gu Xingyin was not very interested. Not many people know my identity, and even fewer people can find me here. Since you can find me here, you must know my price, Gu Xingyin said. The middle-aged man smiled and said, of course. This is the reward we prepared. Gu Xingyin glanced at it and was very satisfied with the 6 zeros behind the number. Put the check down. Tell me what's going on first. Other than accepting tasks assigned by the organization, the biggest source of income for exorcists like them was to accept orders by themselves. Different exorcists naturally had different prices. For someone like Jianglan, 7 figures was just a deposit. Of course, those who could find out Jianglan's identity and address naturally did not care about a mere 7 figures. When the middle-aged man heard Gu Xingyin's agreement, a smile appeared on his face. He reached out his hand and made a gesture of invitation. Why don't we talk as we walk? Gu Xingyin nodded and got up to follow him out. The middle-aged man saw that she did not bring anything and did not lock the door when she came out, so he could not help but feel very strange. Gu Xingyin glanced at him and understood what he was thinking. She replied, don't worry. I always carry things with me when I need them. As for this flower shop, no one will come in. Except for those of you who came here with a purpose. When the middle-aged man heard Gu Xingyin's words, he didn't understand what she meant, but he felt even more respect for Gu Xingyin in his heart. Along the way, the middle-aged man roughly explained the situation on his side. Beijing's Zhou family. Gu Xingyin's eyes narrowed. If she knew about the Zhou family, then it would be really incredible. It turned out that the second young master of the Zhou family had been behaving very strangely since a month ago. As for what exactly was wrong, the middle-aged man stammered and couldn't tell. In the end, he said, you'll know when you see it. This aroused Gu Xingyin's curiosity. What was the status of the Zhou family? Naturally, he would not invite those Jianhu charlatans who only relied on their mouths. As soon as they opened their mouths, they found the most famous exorcist, Jianglan. However, for Gu Xingyin, she didn't care if it was the Li family, the Zhang family, or the Zhou family. She only cared about doing things with money. Soon, the car arrived at a garden. Yes, a garden. To be able to own such a garden in the capital was no longer something that wealth could achieve. Gu Xingyin walked all the way. Every blade of grass and every tree here was obviously the work of a famous master. The middle-aged man had been sizing up Gu Xingyin along the way. Now that he saw that she was still calm in the face of such a scene, he couldn't help but secretly nod in his heart. He had received many visitors here, and very few people could see such a big deal and not be amazed. Chapter 1296. Whether it was because Miss Jianglan was experienced and knowledgeable or because she did not like to show her emotions, it showed that she was not simple. The middle-aged man took Gu Xingyin into a courtyard. The buildings here were all antique. Gu Xingyin stepped through the red lacquer door. This is the courtyard of my second young master. The middle-aged man said. Gu Xingyin frowned from the moment she entered the door. She was sure that this second young master had indeed been stained by something unclean. "Uncle Wen, who did you bring to me?" A lazy voice sounded. Gu Xingyin looked up and could not help but be stunned. This second young master, no matter how one looked at him, was a rare handsome man. His face was like jade, his eyes were like lacquer, his nose was high, and his lips were thin and stylish. But these were not the focus of Gu Xingyin's attention. Was this really the fate of many lifetimes? She could meet him like this. Feeling the familiar aura of this second young master, Gu Xingyin felt helpless. "This beautiful lady, do you think I'm too handsome and charming and have been bewitched by me?" Seeing Gu Xingyin staring at him in a daze, the second young master teased. Gu Xingyin came back to her senses because of this sentence. She restored her cold expression and looked at this person more carefully. At first glance, one would only think that this second young master was very good-looking. But if one took a closer look, one would find that this second young master seemed to have an invisible charm. When he stood there motionless, others could not help but look at him. When he looked at you casually, it would make people feel that he was flirting with you. Gu Xingyin's eyes moved, and suddenly reached out to pull this second young master's neck. "Little beauty, are you going to throw yourself at me? What are you doing?" The second young master screamed and tried to dodge. However, Gu Xingyin's movements were too fast for him to dodge. Gu Xingyin held a ring-shaped red jade pendant in her hand. This jade pendant was engraved with dragon patterns. It was entirely blood-red and cold to the touch. It was clearly not an ordinary item. Second young master Zhou also frowned. "Who is this young lady? How can you casually take other people's things?" Gu Xingyin didn't pay any attention to him. Instead, she carefully sensed the contents of the jade pendant. "This jade pendant, I'm afraid you didn't buy it from a proper place, right?" Gu Xingyin asked. When second young master Zhou was asked this question, his expression was somewhat unnatural. However, the middle-aged man on the side said, "This is something my second young master bought at an auction." The middle-aged man looked at the jade pendant in Gu Xingyin's hand nervously. "Miss Jiang, is this thing causing trouble?" Gu Xingyin sneered, "Why would you hang something of unknown origin on yourself? Consider yourself lucky that you're still alive this time." Her tone was harsh, but second young master Zhou seemed to be a little disapproving. He still squinted at her lazily. Even at this time, there was a trace of indescribable charm in his movements. The middle-aged man seemed to be even more nervous. He hurriedly asked, "Miss Jiang, what's going on?" Gu Xingyin gently rubbed the jade pendant in her hand with her fingers. In ancient times, some emperors liked to make things to liven things up. "You know that, right?" Not knowing why she said this, the middle-aged man nodded. Gu Xingyin snorted coldly and continued, "These things to liven things up have existed in every dynasty. It's just a matter of whether it's detrimental to virtue." Chapter 1297. The middle-aged man was so engrossed that even second young master Zhou didn't have time to glare at Gu Xingyin, but listened to her carefully. In ancient times, there was an emperor who invented a kind of elixir called the red pill to liven things up. Gu Xingyin glanced at them. "I don't know if you've heard of it." They shook their heads. Gu Xingyin slightly lifted the corners of her mouth. "That red pill, in addition to some great supplements for refining elixirs, also has an essential material. That emperor raised all the palace maids who were under 13 years old and had no sexual history together, and took their virginity when they had their first menstrual period. The first blood of a young girl was one of the main ingredients for the red pill. Because the virgin blood was added, the finished product was dark red, so it was called the red pill." When Gu Xingyin finished speaking, the two men's faces didn't look good. The middle-aged man was puzzled, but, "Miss Jiang, does this story have anything to do with our second young master?" "Of course." Gu Xingyin threw the jade pendant in her hand, and the jade pendant fell gently on the table without moving. While refining the red pill, the virgin blood had some other uses. For example, this jade pendant was originally an ordinary piece of white jade. It was placed in the blood and nourished for 49 days. Then, with the help of a special method, the essence of the blood was transferred into the jade pendant. Only then did it become what it is now. EW. A discordant sound came. It turned out to be young Master Zhou. Hearing Gu Xingyin's description and thinking that he had worn such a disgusting thing on his body for a month, he instantly felt uncomfortable. Then, the middle-aged man asked professionally, "My second young master?" Gu Xingyin glanced at the pale second young master Zhou. "This jade pendant, if I'm not wrong, should come from below." Below, of course, there was only the tomb. Second young master Zhou didn't say anything. Obviously, Gu Xingyin was right. The blood of a virgin is an item of extreme yin, and this blood jade has been in the tomb for thousands of years. One can imagine how cold it is. How can an ordinary person withstand it? Gu Xingyin sized up second young master Zhou from head to toe. "Fortunately, you are blessed with abundant good fortune, your house's feng shui is abundant, plus you haven't lost your virginity yet, that's why you only look like this. If it was an ordinary person, I'm afraid he wouldn't even be able to be a man." Hearing this, second young master Zhou's face turned ashen. This woman actually said that he was a virgin without a care in the world. Who in the capital city didn't know that second young master Zhou was known as a womanizer? He subconsciously wanted to retort, "Where did this swindler come from? Who doesn't know of the second young master's, reputation as a playboy who still has yuan yang?" Gu Xingyin coldly replied. Facing her body, second young master Zhou held back for a long time, but in the end, he couldn't say anything. The middle-aged man seemed to know a big secret and looked at second young master Zhou curiously. She really couldn't tell that a person like second young master was actually, looking at his appearance, second young master Zhou felt extremely aggrieved. He couldn't glare at Gu Xingyin, so he could only glare at the middle-aged man. Fortunately, the middle-aged man knew his young master's temperament and didn't dare to provoke him. Looking at the young man who was still lazy and charming, he was a little worried. "Then, Miss Jiang, how can we cure second young master Zhou's condition?" Chapter 1298. How to cure it. Gu Xingyin glanced at second young master Zhou and said, "If you find someone else, it will indeed be more troublesome." Hearing that, the middle-aged man's eyes lit up. Did this Miss Jiang mean that it wouldn't be troublesome if she was the one they found? Sure enough, the next moment, Gu Xingyin said, "However, since you happen to find me, it will be easy to deal with." The middle-aged man looked at Gu Xingyin with joy and said, "Miss Jiang, please tell me." Gu Xingyin glanced at second young master Zhou, who was leaning lazily on the door frame, with disgust and said, "Let him stay with me for a month." Second young master Zhou's current appearance was a typical case of the evil spirit entering his body, and it was the evil spirit of extreme evil. If it was the ordinary way, it would require a lot of medicinal materials with the nature of yang, supplemented by the layout of extreme yang geomancy to remove the evil spirit, and the time would be relatively short. Gu Xingyin was different. She was born to be a jinx. The two words, jinx, were not a joke. If second young master Zhou stayed with her, the evil spirit in his body would naturally begin to retreat. However, when second young master Zhou heard that, he said with a strange smile, "Are you secretly in love with me, so you find such an excuse to get close to me?" Gu Xingyin frowned. Such a character was really unbearable. She patted second young master Zhou's shoulder hard and said, "Speak properly." Her strength was not great for second young master Zhou, who was 1.8 meters tall, but second young master Zhou's whole body was shocked by such a pat. Then second young master Zhou's expression was shocked, and he seemed to be a different person in an instant. Seeing this, the middle-aged man called Uncle Wen's eyes lit up with excitement. This was the second young master Zhou he was familiar with. Second young master Zhou's expression instantly became serious. He glanced at Gu Xingyin with sharp eyes. Gu Xingyin's expression changed and said, "You must have the memory of the previous days. How about it?" Second young master Zhou thought of his strange appearance in the past month, and his handsome face couldn't help but twist for a moment. He bowed to Gu Xingyin. "Miss Jiang, sorry to trouble you." He agreed to Gu Xingyin's suggestion. Gu Xingyin nodded. She did not intend to stay here any longer. She turned around and took out a pen and paper from somewhere and wrote a string of numbers on it. "I've already paid the deposit. This is the remaining amount. When your second young master returns, transfer it to this account." Uncle Wen took the paper solemnly. At this time, second young master Zhou suddenly stood in front of Gu Xingyin. "Miss Jiang, my name is Zhou Bingzhu." This name was rather interesting. Gu Xingyin thought for a while and reached out her hand. "Jiang Lan." The two of them walked out of the Zhou family's courtyard one after the other. By the time he left Zhou University, Zhou Bingzhu had returned to the appearance that Gu Xingyin had seen. He did not have the blood jade on him, and he also remembered the conversation between himself and Gu Xingyin. Although Zhou Bingzhu was a little unwilling, he knew that it was for his own good. "How can I let the beautiful lady drive the car? Let me do it." Gu Xingyin silently endured for a while and found that she could not bear it at all. "Either shut up or talk to me properly." Although Gu Xingyin knew that Zhou Bingzhu became like this because of the evil spirit in his body, she didn't know whether to curse when she saw her lover's soul in such a sissy's body. Chapter 1299. Zhou Bingzhu seemed to be startled by her. However, he didn't refute her, as if he was afraid of something. Instead, he sat in the passenger seat obediently and didn't say anything. Gu Xingyin drove without looking sideways. She didn't give Zhou Bingzhu a glance the whole time. She had already thought it through. Since she couldn't be with her lover in this world, or even be close to him, she wouldn't give him any hints or hope from the beginning. In this way, after a month, Zhou Bingzhu would return to normal and return to the Zhou family. They would still be strangers who had nothing to do with each other. Zhou Bingzhu had a very thick baneful aura on him. Before this layer of baneful aura was removed, he wouldn't be affected by Gu Xingyin's life providence. This was also the reason why Gu Xingyin dared to get someone to follow him. It was already late. Gu Xingyin didn't go to the flower shop anymore. Instead, she drove Zhou Bingzhu straight to her home. Exorcists were not poor financially. Gu Xingyin's apartment was in a high-end residential area in the city. Before Gu Xingyin's car entered the door, Zhou Bingzhu said, "The house is here. It seems that Beauty Zhang's conditions are good." Gu Xingyin gave him a warning look. Zhou Bingzhu's face fell a little bitterly. "It's not my fault. I can't control my words." Gu Xingyin tacitly agreed. She actually knew it. When the Yin spirit entered a person's body, not only would they unconsciously begin to develop the Yin spirit, but they would also become like Zhou Bingzhu, who didn't forget to seduce people. Especially when that piece of blood jade had such a filthy origin. Gu Xingyin said lightly, "Since you can't control it, then don't talk." Zhou Bingzhu actually knew it in his heart, but he couldn't control his words and actions. He thought about it. If he spoke like that every time, it would be better not to speak. However, he turned his head and glanced at Gu Xingyin. This Miss Jiang was really not polite at all. The two of them entered the house. The room on the left is the guest room. The things inside are clean. You can stay there. The living room and your room are public places. You are not allowed to enter my room. If you have any questions, call me. It's this number. Don't bother me if you don't have anything. After Gu Xingyin called Zhou Bingzhu, she turned around and went into her room. Zhou Bingzhu looked at her helplessly and turned to enter the guest room that Gu Xingyin had mentioned. Oh, it was indeed very clean. It could be seen that everything was brand new. No one had lived in this room before. Opening the wardrobe, there were 2 sets of men's and women's pajamas folded neatly in the wardrobe. There were even private underwear. Zhou Bingzhu picked up a set of men's pajamas and smelled it. It was the fresh smell of detergent. Only then did he feel relieved. He took his clothes and went to the bathroom to take a shower. After washing up, Zhou Bingzhu felt a little tired. He didn't even play with his phone before lying down and falling asleep. A dreamless night. The next day, when Zhou Bingzhu woke up, he was stunned when he saw the sunlight leaking in through the curtains. To say something pretentious, this was the best night of sleep he had in the past month. He didn't wake up in the middle of the night because of the cold, and he didn't have all kinds of strange nightmares. This Miss Jiang was indeed a very magical person. Zhou Bingzhu got up. There were disposable toiletries on the sink. When he finished washing up and was about to change his clothes, he realized that he had rushed out with Gu Xingyin yesterday and didn't bring any change of clothes. Chapter 1300. Gu Xingyin was enjoying her breakfast. It was a very simple sandwich with 2 fried eggs and 2 slices of ham. It was the kind that could be eaten with bread. Then, she saw Zhou Bingzhu come out in loose pajamas. Seeing Gu Xingyin coldly staring at him, Zhou Bingzhu said embarrassedly, "I forgot to bring clothes yesterday. I just called Uncle Wen." He still had a lustful look on his face, but his speech was much more normal. Gu Xingyin just nodded. She didn't know that it took Zhou Bingzhu a lot of effort to speak so normally. Zhou Bingzhu sat down at the table and then found that there was no breakfast for him. He pointed at Gu Xingyin in disbelief. Is there no breakfast for me?" Gu Xingyin finished the last bite of breakfast neatly. "You lived in my house and asked me to expel evil spirits for you. Now you want me to make breakfast for you? Zhou Bingzhu, do you think you found a babysitter?" Zhou Bingzhu, so angry. "But I have nothing to say." He instantly felt so wronged and sad. "Stop." Zhou Bingzhu struggled to stop those strange thoughts in his mind. He took out his phone and specially ordered a sumptuous meal for himself. "I won't eat your food." "I don't care. I'll order it myself." "Humph." Realizing that he seemed to have some strange words in his mind, Zhou Bingzhu silently bit his lips. Miss Jiang was right. In his current state, it was better for him not to speak. Such a big man talking more than a little girl. It was really, Zhou Bingzhu just wanted to cover his face. The takeout came quickly. Almost at the moment when the box was opened, a strong fragrance filled the whole restaurant. Gu Xingyin, who was sitting in the living room and pretending to be watching TV but actually in a daze, couldn't help but turn her head. Looking at the table full of food, she frowned. "You ate so much for breakfast." Zhou Bingzhu would never admit that he had deliberately chosen so many things to take revenge on Gu Xingyin. Seeing Gu Xingyin looking over, Zhou Bingzhu straightened his back and smiled. "I don't know which one tastes better, so I ordered all of them." "Miss Jiang, do you want to eat?" Gu Xingyin shook her head. "You can eat by yourself. I'm already full." Then, Zhou Bingzhu began to eat alone. He still expressed his feelings from time to time, saying that this was delicious and this was so good. He felt that he was venting his anger on Gu Xingyin for not giving him breakfast. When he had nothing to do, he ran to his room and stared blankly. He silently recalled his previous actions. Oh, fucking retard. Zhou Bingzhu felt that this whatever lousy inspector had simply caused him to be in trouble. How could this kind of childish behavior of a 7-year-old child happen to him? Uncle Wen quickly brought his clothes here. That night, Gu Xingyin knocked on Zhou Bingzhu's door. "I'm going out tonight. If you have nothing to do, don't go out and run around. Zhou Bingzhu had yin qi on him. Putting aside the fact that it was easy for him to attract strange things, just his unsatisfied look alone was enough to attract a lot of women. No matter which kind it was, Gu Xingyin felt that it was very troublesome. Moreover, she didn't like it very much. After saying that, she was ready to turn and leave, but Zhou Bingzhu stopped her. Are you going to perform a task? His gaze was a little strange. As a member of the Zhou family, Zhou Bingzhu had a certain understanding of exorcists. Chapter 1301. Zhou Bingzhu had heard of a lot of demonic creatures, but he had never seen one. Men were naturally interested in adventurous and exciting things. Gu Xingyin glanced at him. You want to go with me? Zhou Bingzhu nodded. Gu Xingyin said, no. Zhou Bingzhu, Gu Xingyin continued, you're too weak. You'll drag me down. Zhou Bingzhu. Life is hard. In the end, Zhou Bingzhu watched as Gu Xingyin opened and closed the door without hesitation. He silently stayed in the room alone. Cold, so cold, it was as if something cold and gloomy was coming from all directions, burrowing into the blanket and into his body. His body felt heavy, as if it was being pressed down by something invisible, but he couldn't open his eyes no matter how hard he tried. Zhou Bingzhu knew that the feeling was coming again. He wanted to escape, but he could not avoid it. It was really uncomfortable. The light in the room was suddenly turned on, and Zhou Bingzhu suddenly opened his eyes. He saw Gu Xingyin standing at the door. Gu Xingyin frowned and looked at him. Have you always been like this? Zhou Bingzhu was still in a daze. He nodded when he heard the question. But after thinking for a while, he shook his head. Not last night. Gu Xingyin understood. It was because she was there last night. She had just finished her task and came back. She felt that there was a strong yin energy in her room. Looking at the source, it was Zhou Bingzhu's room. She thought that it would be fine to let Zhou Bingzhu stay in her room. But it seemed that it was not possible. He had to stay by her side. Looking at Zhou Bingzhu's pale body, Gu Xingyin said, go back to sleep. Zhou Bingzhu looked at her tidy clothes and asked, what about you? Gu Xingyin lowered her eyes. I'll sit here for a while. The closer the two of them were to each other, the greater the effect of the innate ferocious qi in her body. Zhou Bingzhu's discomfort would be eliminated sooner. Even though Zhou Bingzhu was currently possessed by the yin spirit, the original thoughts in his heart had not been buried. He also knew that it was not good to let a girl watch over him while he slept. He said uncomfortably, why don't you go back to your room and rest? I'm used to it anyway. After he finished speaking, he saw the woman standing at the door glaring at him. If I tell you to sleep, then sleep. Don't talk so much nonsense. I've received your commission, so before the yin qi in your body is removed, I have the obligation to look after you. Zhou Bingzhu was young, handsome, and rich. He had always been successful among the young girls. When had he ever been tortured and yelled at? However, this eccentric Miss Jiang didn't treat him well the first time she saw him. Zhou Bingzhu sighed to himself. But now that he was the one who needed help, he didn't want to argue with a woman. When he closed his eyes, Zhou Bingzhu thought that he wouldn't be able to sleep. But perhaps he was too tired in the first half of the night. As soon as his head touched the pillow, he felt sleepy. Without that familiar cold feeling, he fell into a deep sleep. When she was sure that this person was sleeping soundly, Gu Xingyin's expression became gentle. She slowly walked to the bed and quietly stared at the peaceful sleeping face of the person on the bed. She reached out as if she wanted to touch his face, but just as she was about to touch him, she thought of something and quickly withdrew her hand. Chapter 1302. When Zhou Bingzhu got up the next day, he found that it was already late. He remembered what happened last night and quickly opened his eyes to look around the room, but he didn't see Gu Xingyin. It felt good to have a good night's sleep and feel refreshed. Zhou Bingzhu washed up and opened the door. He happened to see Gu Xingyin pushing the door open and entering the room. She was carrying something in her hand, and there was some dew on her hair. Obviously, she had woken up early. Zhou Bingzhu looked at the bag in her hand. It was some vegetables and meat. Obviously, it was food for cooking. You cook by yourself? Zhou Bingzhu was a little surprised. In Zhou Bingzhu's heart, exorcists were quite mysterious. He even felt that this group of people was otherworldly, let alone cook by themselves. Gu Xingyin glanced at him and said, "If I don't cook, I will starve to death." Zhou Bingzhu, he found that he always had to hold back when talking to this person. Gu Xingyin entered the door with the food. Suddenly, she turned back to look at him and asked, "Do you want to eat?" Zhou Bingzhu asked warily, "Can I eat with you?" After the previous few lessons, he already knew that he must be careful when talking to this woman. Then he saw that the woman in front of him seemed to smile briefly. The smile disappeared so quickly that Zhou Bingzhu wasn't even sure if it was his illusion. "Of course. If you want to eat at my place, the price will be calculated in addition to the original commission." Zhou Bingzhu was relieved when he heard that. Fortunately, if she just wanted money, everything could be settled. So, this matter was settled happily. To be honest, Zhou Bingzhu was a little curious. Gu Xingyin casually took orders by herself and made more money than many people in their lifetime, but she seemed to be very obsessed with money. Second young master Zhou had always been the kind of person who asked directly when he had doubts, and this time was no exception. Gu Xingyin felt a little strange when she heard his words. "The money I want is what I deserve." She looked at Zhou Bingzhu with her clear eyes as if he had asked a stupid question. "It's my business that I can earn my own money, but you eat my food. Don't tell me you don't need to spend money just because I'm rich." Zhou Bingzhu. What he said seemed to make sense. But he still felt that something was wrong. Gu Xingyin didn't receive missions every day. At her level, there weren't many monsters that she could personally deal with. Sometimes, she would only receive one mission in a month. On normal days, Zhou Bingzhu followed Gu Xingyin to the flower shop to help out. Yes, helpers. Gu Xingyin was lying on a comfortable recliner that she had specially found someone to custom make for her to bask in the sun, while Zhou Bingzhu was there as a waiter and cashier. Thanks to Zhou Bingzhu, Gu Xingyin's small shop, which no one cared about all year round, actually had a few customers. They were all young and lively girls. Most of them were attracted by Zhou Bingzhu's face outside the door. Zhou Bingzhu was originally good-looking, and with the effect of the Yin spirit, his whole person exuded a strange temptation. Ordinary people couldn't control themselves when they saw him. This guy was good at pretending. In the past few days, under Gu Xingyin's training, he had changed his sissy way of speaking. For young girls, he was simply a big killing machine comparable to nuclear weapons. Chapter 1303. Seeing that he had sold a few more pots of flowers, Gu Xingyin, who had been resting with her eyes closed, said, "Before you use the Yin energy to remove it, remember to keep a distance from women." Hearing this, Zhou Bingzhu suddenly smiled wickedly. "Keep a distance from women? Don't I live with Miss Jiang every day?" Gu Xingyin didn't open her eyes. "I'm different. You don't have to treat me as a woman." Zhou Bingzhu didn't seem to have nightmares these 2 days, nor was he affected by the Yin energy. He was in good spirits and was in the mood to joke. Oh. Could it be that Miss Jiang is a man dressed as a woman? Gu Xingyin suddenly opened her eyes and looked at Zhou Bingzhu. "Don't try to get information from me, and don't try to understand me. It won't do you any good to understand me." Her tone was very cold. It was clear that she didn't want to have anything to do with Zhou Bingzhu. The smile on Zhou Bingzhu's face froze. He immediately lowered his head and smiled. I know. Miss Jiang is an otherworldly person. She doesn't want to have anything to do with a common person like me. Gu Xingyin opened her mouth, as if she wanted to say something. In the end, she just closed her eyes and fell silent. The two of them didn't talk for the entire afternoon. These peaceful days lasted for a week. It had been 10 days since Zhou Bingzhu came to Gu Xingyin's room. The change in him was very obvious. The faintly discernible charm on him had almost disappeared, but he still looked a little lazy. Uncle Wen came to check on him every few days. Now, he looked at Gu Xingyin as if he was her second parent. During lunch, Gu Xingyin suddenly said, I have a mission tonight. You come with me. Zhou Bingzhu's eyes lit up. I'll go with you. Gu Xingyin nodded and didn't say anything else. Zhou Bingzhu asked, do I need to prepare anything? Gu Xingyin shook her head. You just need to come with me. Wear thick clothes and don't catch a cold. Zhou Bingzhu, although the other party's words seemed to be concerned, he still felt like he was being despised. He silently finished the rice in his bowl, feeling a little stifled. At 8:00 in the evening, Gu Xingyin opened the door and glanced at Zhou Bingzhu who was sitting on the sofa. Let's go. Zhou Bingzhu looked at her and his eyes lit up. The woman in front of him had obviously dressed up and even put on light makeup. She was completely different from the Jiang Lan he usually saw. He couldn't help but ask, do you guys have a dress code when you go out on missions? Gu Xingyin glanced at him. You'll know when the time comes. Zhou Bingzhu obediently followed her into the car. He was a little curious. Don't you need to bring anything? He knew that exorcists had their own special weapons. Gu Xingyin smiled. You'll know when the time comes. Their destination was a famous entertainment street in the city. The car stopped in front of a famous high-end clubhouse. Zhou Bingzhu's mouth twitched when he saw the name of the clubhouse. He had been to this place a few times with a few friends. Gu Xingyi knew what was going on when she saw his expression. Why? Have you been here before? Zhou Bingzhu felt a little guilty. I've been here with a few friends, but Gu Xingyin interrupted him. I know. It's just for fun. As she spoke, she looked at Zhou Bingzhu's lower body thoughtfully. That gaze made Zhou Bingzhu grit his teeth. What kind of gaze is that? I just have high standards and have misophobia. It's not like I can't do it. Chapter 1304. However, knowing that Gu Xingyin was coming here, Zhou Bingzhu understood why Gu Xingyin had specially dressed up. In this kind of place, it had always been a matter of meeting the strong and stepping on the weak. If Gu Xingyin had followed her previous routine, she might not even have been able to enter the door. However, when they reached the door, Zhou Bingzhu was even more embarrassed. The waiter at the door knew him. But it made sense. As the second son of the Zhou family, he was definitely a big customer that every club had to treat well. As long as these people were not blind, they would have to treat him well. However, Zhou Bingzhu strangely did not want to show that he was very familiar with this kind of place in front of Gu Xingyin. The waiter was about to approach him, but he was stared back by Zhou Bingzhu's eyes. When the two of them entered the door, the manager also came in with his men. The manager's eyesight was much better. When he saw that Zhou Bingzhu had brought a female companion, he did not mention anything about the girl. He just eagerly led them into a very elegantly decorated private room. May I know what you two need? Gu Xingyin did not speak. Zhou Bingzhu waved his hand, no need. Unless I call for someone, don't let anyone in to disturb us. Hearing this, the manager showed an expression of understanding. It seemed that young Master Zhou wanted to play something new. He secretly looked at Gu Xingyin. He did not know which family this beautiful lady was from. He seemed to have never seen her before. After the manager left, Zhou Bingzhu finally asked the question that he had been holding back for a long time. Didn't you say that you were going to do a task? Why are we here? Gu Xingyin took out a small thing from nowhere and threw it on Zhou Bingzhu's collar. The small thing stuck on his collar and did not move. Zhou Bingzhu subconsciously wanted to take it, but Gu Xingyin stopped him. This can make the surveillance camera unable to see you. She opened the door and began to walk forward with familiarity. Follow me. Zhou Bingzhu saw that she did not even need to think to find the place she wanted to go in the complex route of the club. He secretly sighed in his heart, Miss Jiang seems to be more familiar with this place than I am. Exorcists were really a knowledgeable profession. If Gu Xingyin knew what he was thinking, she would definitely say in her heart, you're thinking too much. She only sensed the mission target's aura and then let the system automatically plan the simplest route. The walkway was very quiet. Occasionally, one could see waiters pushing small carts forward. However, none of the waiters dared to raise their heads to look at the two of them. Their journey was exceptionally smooth. Until they reached a private room. Gu Xingyin stopped. Zhou Bingzhu's heart was filled with anticipation. Could this be the destination? Before entering, Gu Xingyin took out a yellow talisman bag with a red string tied to it. Later, when you enter the door, stay at the entrance. Don't make a sound and don't walk around. Otherwise, I won't be responsible if anything happens. Do you hear me? Gu Xingyin said in a low voice. Zhou Bingzhu nodded. Then, Gu Xingyin pushed the door open. Gentle pure music was playing in the private room, and the atmosphere inside seemed to be very good. When Gu Xingyin glanced over, she saw that the middle-aged fatty with very white skin had already put his hand under the skirt of the beauty in his arms. Being disturbed, the fatty seemed to be very unhappy. Who is it? At first sight of Gu Xingyin, the fatty's eyes lit up. When he saw Zhou Bingzhu enter behind her, the expression on his face became even stranger. Chapter 1305. Second young master, how come you have the leisure to come here today? When the fatty saw Zhou Bingzhu, the displeasure on his face had completely turned into a smile. The beauty in his arms seemed to be somewhat dissatisfied because his movement stopped, and softly muttered something. The fatty didn't let go of her. People who could come to this kind of place, everyone knew what was going on in their minds, so there was no need to put on an act here. Then, the white fatty saw that very beautiful woman walking towards him, and then, a long sword appeared out of thin air, and directly slashed towards him. What the hell? The fatty felt that his belief in materialism was on the verge of collapse. What happened next was even more shocking to him. The delicate and pitiful beauty who had been sitting on his body, suddenly retreated at a speed that ordinary people couldn't possibly have. Then, he was hit by a strong force, and his whole body was pushed back several meters along with the sofa. The fatty's round body also rolled, and solidly fell behind the sofa. This. Is this the strength that a human should have? The fatty got up with great difficulty, but before he had time to complain, the scene in front of him once again scared him down. His gentle and small female companion suddenly opened her mouth, and that mouth instantly became like a black hole, instantly covering her whole face. Then, like molting, that white and delicate skin suddenly burst open, and a dark monster grew out of that beauty's body. It was like the legendary painted skin. Thinking that he had just been affectionate with such a guy for such a long time, and almost went into battle with real swords and spears. This middle-aged fatty felt his stomach churn, and his face became pale. That monster opened its green eyes, and its mouth made a ho-ho sound, which was particularly horrifying in this dim room. Gu Xingyin only took a glance. An intermediate monster was not a powerful guy. It was probably because the other colleagues had a task, and could only temporarily assign it to her. The long sword in her hand lit up, and without hesitation, she slashed towards that monster. That monster seemed to feel the threat of the long sword, and wanted to dodge. But how could Gu Shengyin let her escape? The bright sword light landed on the monster's body. It was like a special effect in a movie. The monster's body froze for a moment, and then suddenly exploded. Its broken body began to burn automatically before it hit the ground, turning into ashes in the air. Everything returned to normal. "Turn on the lights," Gu Shengyin said lightly. His words woke up the two people who were immersed in shock. Zhou Bingzhu reacted quickly and quickly turned on the switch beside his hand. The entire room instantly lit up. The fatty suddenly came back to his senses and looked at Gu Shengyin as if he was looking at a god. This. Master. Master, what was that just now? Gu Shengyin glanced at him. Perverts like to dress up as beauties to seduce perverted men. The fat middle-aged man's expression changed at the mention of a perverted man. However, he still had some lingering fear. Then, Master, that thing is dead, right? This was the thing he was most concerned about. Gu Shengyin smiled faintly. This one is dead, but there is more than one perverted woman in this world. If you are still like this, there will always be something coming up. Chapter 1306. When the middle-aged man heard this, his face did not look very good. Gu Shengyin's words were not pleasant to hear, but what she said was the truth. It was true that the monsters were rampant, but what kind of people did they often like to find? They were all people with more evil thoughts. From these people, they could get more things they wanted. If the middle-aged man had not been lustful, the monsters would not have found him so easily. The middle-aged man was also a big boss. When the people below looked at him, who was not polite. However, Gu Shengyin casually opened her mouth to teach him a lesson. He thought for a moment and said in a deep tone, "Thank you for your help today, but this matter." He paused and pointed to the messy box. "This kind of thing, it's not good to talk about it. I hope the master and second young master can keep it a secret." Zhou Bingzhu was a little angry when he heard this sentence. What did it mean? They saved him, but the fatty still looked like this. He wanted to say something, but Gu Shengyin pulled him. "Let's go." The two went straight out of the club. As soon as they went out, Zhou Bingzhu could not help but say, "Why did you pull me just now?" Fatty Wang, did he really think he could go to heaven just because he was promoted? I was going to scold him. Gu Shengyin kept walking to her car. Generally, people who have been entangled by monsters will leave a special breath in their body for a month. This kind of breath is easy to attract other monsters. Zhou Bingzhu's eyes lit up when he heard this. Gu Shengyin continued, "Every time I finish a mission, if there's a survivor, I'll give him a special talisman paper. The talisman paper can conceal the aura left behind by the demonic creatures." She sneered and said, "Today's man, since he doesn't need it, I will save something, won't I?" Zhou Bingzhu had completely understood what she meant. He thought for a moment and thought about the appearance of the monsters today. He felt that Fatty Wang seemed to be in big trouble. Gu Shengyin secretly said in her heart, "It's more than bad luck." Today, at first glance, she could tell that this person was plagued by evil. She was afraid that he had done a lot of heinous things in his daily life. This kind of person was originally the favorite target of the magical creatures, and he had recklessly offended Gu Shengyin. From Gu Shengyin's point of view, the man she saw today would soon face a bloody disaster. She pulled open the car door and was about to get in when her expression suddenly froze and she looked not far away. Zhou Bingzhu was about to get into the car, but when he saw Gu Shengyin's expression, he couldn't help but stand there. A red Ferrari supercar stopped next to the two of them in a very handsome manner. After that, a beauty wearing sunglasses who was dressed very provocatively got out of the car. "Lon Lon, what a coincidence. You're here too." The beauty took off her sunglasses and greeted Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin frowned. Miss Yan, please call me Miss Jiang, or Jiang Lan. The implication was that they weren't so familiar with each other. Yan Zi readily accepted. Well, Jiang Lan, what a coincidence. This is. Gu Xingyin didn't mean to speak. Zhou Bingzhu felt that he should stand up and introduce himself, but looking at Gu Xingyin's appearance, it seemed that she didn't like this lady. He thought for a moment and felt that his current backer was Gu Xingyin. So he decisively chose to stand in the same place and silently become a background. Anyway, she wasn't asking him, right? Chapter 1307. The atmosphere became quite awkward for a moment. Fortunately, Yan Zi was already prepared to be ignored by Gu Xingyin. She said helplessly, I just want to be friends with you, Jiang Lan. Is it so difficult? Zhou Bingzhu lowered his head and pretended to be silent. In fact, his ears were pricked up. There was a story. Gu Xingyin said coldly, I've already said that I don't need friends. Perhaps because there were people around, Yan Zi felt that some things were not suitable to say, so she changed the topic. You have a mission tonight? Gu Xingyin nodded and then opened the car door. I'm going back. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that she was rejecting Yan Zi. Yan Zi was helpless and could only say, okay, then be careful on the road. Gu Xingyin got into the car. When Zhou Bingzhu sat in the passenger seat, she stepped on the accelerator and the car instantly left. Yan Zi, who was left behind, stood there silently and looked at them. That man was the second son of the Zhou family in the capital. The second son of the Zhou family in the capital. If she remembered correctly, he had nothing to do with Jiang Lan in her previous life. Could it be that after her rebirth, Jiang Lan's life trajectory had also changed? Yan Zi was a little confused. But, she felt that she was more indifferent to her than in her previous life, and even rejected her. Could it be? A possibility flashed through Yan Zi's mind. Her mind cleared. If she was also the same, then all these made sense. If she could be reborn, why couldn't others? The more Yan Zi thought about it, the more she felt that her guess was correct. If Jiang Lan was also reborn and knew that she had indirectly caused her death in her previous life, then it was reasonable for her to hate and be dissatisfied with her. Yan Zi decided to find a chance to test Gu Xingyin next time. In Gu Xingyin's car. Zhou Bingzhu asked curiously, the beauty who just greeted you, is she also an exorcist? Gu Xingyin looked at the road ahead and casually answered, yes. Zhou Bingzhu felt very strange. In his impression, exorcists should be the kind of masters who wore black cloaks and had an unfathomable aura. However, he had seen her with his own eyes. She actually looked like an ordinary city beauty. In fact, if they did not say it themselves, even if they saw it with their own eyes, no one would be able to tell that they were actually the most mysterious and powerful exorcists. He then asked casually, are all exorcists as beautiful as you? Gu Xingyin tilted his head and looked at him strangely. Of course not. There are all kinds of people. She thought of something and said faintly, don't tell me you like her. Zhou Bingzhu quickly shook his head. How is that possible? I don't even know her. Even if. He suddenly stopped talking. Gu Xingyin followed his unfinished words and asked, what? Zhou Bingzhu suppressed his thumping heartbeat and replied that it was nothing. She glanced sideways and realized that Gu Xingyin was not looking at her. In his heart, he was somewhat glad, but also somewhat disappointed. He turned his head to look at the neon lights outside the car window to cover up his loss of composure. When he said that he liked her, he almost blurted out, even if I like her, I prefer someone like you. He did not say this sentence out loud, but he said it in his heart. As soon as this sentence appeared in his mind, Zhou Bingzhu was shocked. When did such a thought flash through his mind? Chapter 1308. Along the way, Zhou Bingzhu was strangely silent. Gu Xingyin glanced at Zhou Bingzhu, who was in a bad mood. She wanted to ask, but thinking of the situation of her body, she restrained herself. Forget it. They went back to Gu Xingyin's house without saying anything. Back home, Zhou Bingzhu just said in a hurry, "I'm a little tired. I'll go to wash and sleep first." Then he went into his room. Gu Xingyin stood behind him and felt a little strange. She didn't say much and just said, Her cold reaction made Zhou Bingzhu's heart skip a beat. After taking a bath, he lay on the bed. There was no cold air drilling into his limbs and bones. The warm quilt made Zhou Bingzhu very comfortable. In such a situation, Zhou Bingzhu almost fell asleep as soon as he touched the pillow. But today he couldn't sleep. There was a problem in his heart. Zhou Bingzhu was not a little boy who didn't know anything. Although he had never experienced the real love between a man and a woman, he might have seen more feelings than ordinary people. He might also know more about the feelings between men and women than ordinary people. Because of this, after he blurted out that sentence, he instantly realized something deep in his heart that he had never paid attention to. When did he have an unusual feeling for Jianglan? Whether it was the words that he blurted out, or his conditioned guilty conscience and flustered expression, it all showed that he cared about Jianglan more than a little. Why did he have an unusual feeling for Jianglan? Zhou Bingzhu thought silently. They had been together for 2 weeks, but they had never done anything intimate. Perhaps if compared to his usual interactions with others, the relationship between him and Jianglan could be considered as cold and indifferent. Jianglan's attitude to him was not good. She took him in only because she took the money, so she was responsible for him. If others treated second young master Zhou like this, second young master Zhou would not rush to take care of them with his self-esteem. But Jianglan was different. Jianglan didn't mean to be bad to him. She was such a character. She treated everyone with the same indifference. Such a person was better than a hypocrite who smiled on the surface but looked empty in the eyes. Only then did Zhou Bingzhu realize that he had actually subconsciously found so many excuses for Jianglan. How was she, Jianglan, worthy of him acting like this? Second young master Zhou reached out a hand to block the somewhat dazzling light above his head as he thought silently. Of course, he couldn't think of any results. Feelings were something that came from nowhere. Second young master Zhou silently turned over in his quilt and finally got up. The faint sound of a TV program came from the living room. He opened the door, and sure enough, Gu Xingyin was sitting on the sofa in her home clothes, watching TV. The makeup on her face had been washed off, and her face was clean without any makeup. Zhou Bingzhu didn't know if it was because he had just realized his feelings for her, but he felt that she looked much better now than when she was wearing exquisite makeup. "Aren't you sleeping?" Gu Xingyin asked. Zhou Bingzhu casually made up an excuse. "I'm not sleepy anymore after taking a shower." Gu Xingyin did not speak again. Zhou Bingzhu also sat down on the sofa next to her. Gu Xingyin was watching TV, and Zhou Bingzhu was looking at her. It was the first time for him to look at Gu Xingyin so seriously. Chapter 1309. Her facial features were delicate and pretty to the extreme, which was exquisite. The girl seemed to be very faint. He had faint eyebrows, faint facial features, pale skin, and even his lips were a pale pink without any color of blood. She sat quietly in the living room, right beside him. But Zhou Bingzhu had a feeling that she was not by his side at all. Yes. He finally understood what Jianglan made him feel. It was as if she had erected an invisible fence around herself, separating herself from everyone around her and from the rest of the world. She was unapproachable. Zhou Bingzhu remembered her words, "I don't need any friends." He frowned. "You've been looking at me for so long. What do you want to do? Suddenly, a cold female voice sounded in his ear. Look at her. Even her voice was so cold. Zhou Bingzhu's first reaction was actually this. Fortunately, he quickly came to his senses and smiled. I'm just curious. You said to that woman today that you don't need any friends. Why? Gu Xingyin frowned. From Zhou Bingzhu's angle, he could see that the woman in front of him looked much more childish after doing this. But her words were not childish at all, there's no why. I just don't need any. Usually, if she spoke like this, Zhou Bingzhu would be very sensible and stop asking. But today, Zhou Bingzhu was a little unforgiving. Why? It's impossible for a person to exist without a group. Gu Xingyin looked at him with some doubts, not understanding why he was like this today. She thought for a moment and said, the person you're talking about refers to ordinary human beings like you. For example, I'm an exorcist. I'm different from ordinary human beings. I'm more used to walking alone in the night with the evening wind as my companion. As for friends, I really don't need any. I enjoy being alone, if you call that loneliness. Zhou Bingzhu found himself speechless. Because he noticed that when Gu Xingyin said these words, her expression was so natural, without a trace of reluctance. In other words, she really thought so from the bottom of her heart. This was a woman who had completely sealed her heart. For a person who doesn't even need a friend, how can you walk into her heart and even become her partner? Zhou Bingzhu felt that the most rational thing to do was to withdraw before he was trapped. After recovering his health, second young master Zhou was able to find a girl that he liked among numerous beauties of all shapes and sizes. After that, he would spend the rest of his life with her. He didn't need to lock himself to a woman who trapped him in a wall. Gu Xingyin noticed that Zhou Bingzhu's aura suddenly became heavy. What was wrong with him? Gu Xingyin was a little puzzled. Why did she feel that there was something wrong with him since tonight? Could it be the after-effects of removing the Yin specter? Zhou Bingzhu lowered his head, his mind in a mess. Suddenly, he felt a cool touch on his wrist. It was a fair and soft hand. He looked up in surprise and saw Gu Xingyin cocking his head to listen attentively. Zhou Bingzhu's heart pounded in an instant. Gu Xingyin felt around Zhou Bingzhu's body, but she didn't find anything strange. Chapter 13:10. Raising her head, Gu Xingyin found that Zhou Bingzhu was looking at her with a burning gaze. Gu Xingyin let go of his hand. I just checked. Everything in your body is normal. But this is the first time I've done something like removing Yin Fiend. If you feel any discomfort in your body, you must tell me immediately. Hearing Gu Xingyin's cold words and her businesslike tone, Zhou Bingzhu's excited heart seemed to have been splashed with a bucket of cold water. It was completely cold. He calmly put his hand into his pocket and said, "Okay, thank you for Miss Zhang's concern." It was this tone again. Gu Xingyin felt it was strange. But knowing that Zhou Bingzhu was fine and unwilling to communicate with him, Gu Xingyin nodded and said no more. The two of them watched TV in silence. In the next few days, the relationship between the two was like this. Other than eating and going out together, there was never any extra communication. Zhou Bingzhu was more or less angry. Although Gu Xingyin felt that the atmosphere between the two of them was too cold, when he thought of his life providence, he felt that this was the best for the two of them, so he didn't say anything else. A month passed by very quickly. Tomorrow, the Yin Fiend in Zhou Bingzhu's body would be completely gone. When Gu Xingyin was sitting on the sofa and eating fruit, she saw Zhou Bingzhu sitting on the balcony and basking in the sun. After most of the Yin energy had been dispelled, the pretentious posture on his body suddenly disappeared. Without that disgusting temperament, Zhou Bingzhu's physical advantages were completely revealed. Handsome and three-dimensional features, tall and straight figure, and his shining identity as the second master of the Zhou family. He was the perfect candidate for a boyfriend and husband. Gu Xingyin moved her gaze away. Many people would like this kind of man, right? She felt a sour feeling in her heart. She could not chase after her man, could not get close to him, and had to stay away from him. Gu Xingyin felt uncomfortable with this feeling. She clutched her chest. System, don't you think I'm being too selfish? I can't be with him, and I can't stand him being with another woman. The system replied quietly, Host, I remember seeing a saying before, a person who is magnanimous when it comes to love either doesn't love you or is an idiot. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but smile. Okay, thank you. Zhou Bingzhu turned around and saw the smile. His smile was very faint, and it disappeared very quickly. It was like a white lotus quietly blooming in the middle of the night, quietly blooming and withering when no one was watching it. And he became the only passerby who witnessed it. Zhou Bingzhu turned his head and thought to himself, I wonder who or what could make her smile like that. In any case, it wouldn't be him. At 3 in the afternoon, Gu Xingyin received a mission. In the south of the city, a high-level demon was discovered. In addition to being more powerful, the most obvious characteristic of high-level magical creatures was that they had evolved intelligence. Gu Xingyin recalled the plot. Jiang Lan had not received this mission. In other words, the direction of the plot of this world had changed. The Exorcist Department also sent a message to Gu Xingyin, saying that the situation of this magical creature seemed to be a bit troublesome, and also arranged a partner for her. To let Jiang Lan work together with an exorcist, Gu Xingyin had to be vigilant against this magical creature. Chapter 13:11. During dinner, she told Zhou Bingzhu that she had a mission at night and asked him to stay in the house. Zhou Bingzhu felt a little strange, don't I have to go with you? Gu Xingyin looked a little serious, this mission is more dangerous. I may not be able to protect you. She thought for a moment and said, well, the evil spirits in your body have basically been removed. They can't do anything to you. Just in case, you stay in my room tonight. She had lived here for several years, and the things in the room were stained with her aura. Such a weak evil spirit should not be able to harm Zhou Bingzhu. Zhou Bingzhu also knew the priorities. He knew that it was an exorcist's mission, and he would only cause trouble if he went there. He asked, your mission is more dangerous. Then you have to be careful. Gu Xingyin nodded. At 6:00 in the evening, Gu Xingyin went out on time. When she arrived at the appointed place, she saw Yan Zi in a trench coat and leather pants. She frowned, it's you. Gu Xingyin frowned for 2 reasons. First, it was Yan Zi. She did not have a good impression of the person who severely harmed Jiang Lan in the original plot. Second, it was Yan Zi. The monster that could make 2 of the most powerful young exorcists in the department was likely to be more troublesome than she thought. Yan Zi saw her frown and smiled helplessly, I know you hate me, Jiang Lan, but this time we are doing a mission. Please bear with it. Gu Xingyin glanced at her, don't worry, I know what's important. She did not deny that Yan Zi said she hated her. For convenience, Gu Xingyin directly parked the car here and got in the same car with Yan Zi. Compared with Yan Zi's car, although Yan Zi's car was a little flashy, its performance was indeed better. Gu Xingyin would never fight over such a trivial matter. The 2 arrived at the mission location provided by the organization. It was just dark, and the monsters were about to come out to look for food. Exorcists could not do missions during the day because the monsters would hide during the day. They hid in places where no human could find them. They only appear at night. They could only be destroyed when they appeared at night. This was an abandoned factory. Normally, no one would think of coming here. There were no lights, and it was dark and messy. It was a little scary in this quiet atmosphere. Gu Xingyin immediately summoned the honed sword from his body. Yan Zi did not dare to be careless. She raised her hands and a long metal whip appeared in her hands. "Don't move," Gu Shengyin suddenly whispered. Yan Zi looked at her strangely and stood still obediently. The system began to search the area. Searching in progress. "Host, please wait for a moment." "Host, quickly retreat." The system's voice rang out. Gu Shengyin reacted quickly. When she heard the system's voice, she subconsciously stepped back and pulled Yan Zi, who did not know what was going on, along the way. Just as the two of them retreated, the ground where they had been standing suddenly exploded. A figure shrouded in black fog appeared before the two of them. "Human, race." The shadow actually stuttered in human language. Gu Shengyin and Yan Zi almost instantly entered the battle state. "It's greed." Gu Shengyin's eyes focused and said. "No wonder. If it was greed, it could grow to this point." Chapter 13:12. There were many desires in the world, and there were many kinds of monsters that were formed in the end. Generally speaking, the more evil thoughts a monster absorbed, the stronger it would become. Greed was the most widespread evil thought in the human world. A man who was never content was like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. Almost all the desires were caused by greed. The reason why this monster was so powerful was because it was born out of greed. Gu Shengyin immediately brandished the long sword in her hand. "Do it." As exorcists, they were not afraid of the dark. They could see things in the dark as if it was daytime, so the monster did not have an advantage here. The sword light that could kill a mid-level monster was dodged by the monster in front of them in an instant. This speed, Gu Shengyin felt a chill in her heart. She raised her vigilance against this monster. No wonder the organization wanted her and Yan Zi to act together. This monster was indeed not easy to deal with. Pa! The monster dodged Gu Shengyin's sword light, but failed to avoid Yan Zi's long whip. Ayo! The monster howled in pain and actually reached out to grab Yan Zi's whip. Yan Zi felt a twitch. She could not pull it away. The monster grabbed the whip and dragged it to its side, but Yan Zi couldn't let go. Under such circumstances, if she lost her weapon, it would be a very dangerous thing. Gu Shengyin saw the current situation and swung her sword. Yan Zi only felt that her hand was loosened, and the whip returned to her hand. The demonic creature roared at the sky. Gu Shengyin had severed its entire arm with a single slash. In the eyes of the two, there was no blood flowing out of the wound. Instead, there was a trace of black mist that was exactly the same as the one that shrouded the monster. This was the evil thoughts. If this monster could not be eliminated this time, as long as the evil thoughts continued to devour it, its arm would be whole again. Gu Shengyin and Yan Zi looked at each other. They did not talk nonsense and attacked the monster at the same time. Although this demonic creature was powerful, it was still no match for the two of them combined. Soon, the demonic creature began to show signs of defeat, and Gu Shengyin took the opportunity to stab it in the back. Black smoke billowed, and evil thoughts poured out continuously. This was a good opportunity. Gu Shengfei stepped forward and thrust his sword straight into the monster's mouth. This was the monster's weak point. However, the sword was stuck in the monster's mouth. The monster had bitten Gu Shengyin's sword with its teeth. In order to increase the strength of this sword, Gu Shengyin went in front of the monster. At this moment, she could even see the uneven skin on the monster's body. The monster was obviously paying attention to the person who had injured it several times. Its remaining undamaged claw went straight for Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin only had two choices, one was to abandon the sword, and the other was to be seriously injured. If she did not abandon the sword, with the sharpness of the monster's claws, it could definitely scratch 2 wounds on Gu Shengyin's body. If she abandoned the sword, Gu Shengyin could be temporarily safe. However, that sword was her life weapon. If it was damaged by the monster, she would still be seriously injured. Gu Xingyin weighed the pros and cons and decided to take a risk. If the monster hurt her, it would inevitably relax at that moment. She would risk this injury and seize this opportunity. Seeing that the claws were about to reach her body, Gu Xingyin did not dodge, and her face was calm. Chapter 13:13. Her eyes were like cold lightning, directly locking onto the monster's throat. Just when the sharp claws were about to touch Gu Xingyin's skin, the monster's movements suddenly froze, and it raised its head high. Gu Xingyin didn't have time to think about what happened to it. She couldn't let go of this rare opportunity. The long sword in her hand stretched forward like lightning, and she silently recited a spell. The bright sword light instantly lit up the dark factory. Yan Zi, who was standing behind the monster, could clearly see that there was a bowl-sized hole in the monster's throat. "Retreat!" Gu Xingyin shouted. Yan Zi nodded, and the two quickly moved away from the monster. Sure enough, when the two retreated to a safe distance, they saw the monster's body suddenly expand, and it actually expanded to 3 or 4 times its normal size. When the body swelled to its limit, it was as if it had been gently poked by something invisible. Bang! A huge explosion sounded, and a huge gust of wind blew the already messy factory into a mess. When the wind blew over, Gu Xingyin and Yan Zi walked out one after another. "Just now, thank you," Gu Xingyin said. To be honest, she was very surprised. After all, she really didn't expect that Yan Zi would choose to save her at that time. Yan Zi was silent for a moment, and suddenly smiled. "Can I buy you a cup of coffee?" Gu Xingyin thought for a moment, and nodded. When they got in the car, Gu Xingyin touched her pocket, and found that her phone was missing. She might have left it in the factory. After experiencing the self-destruction of that magical creature, even the best quality mobile phone would not be able to leave anything behind. She thought to herself that she should change her phone tomorrow. Yan Zi had always been a person who knew how to enjoy. She took Gu Xingyin to a very famous Western restaurant in the city. The environment here was very elegant, and the seats were very far apart. The glass was also soundproof, so they didn't have to worry about their conversation being heard. After the two of them finished ordering, they fell into silence. Yan Zi was the first to speak. Ever since I woke up one day, I've had some new memories in my mind." She looked at Gu Xingyin. "Do you hate me so much because of something?" Gu Xingyin raised his head and stared at her, as if trying to determine if she was telling the truth. In her mind, she was chatting with the system. "System, this is a bit too much information." The system's body flashed with white light. Verifying, but Yan Zi had already spoken. "Do you hate me because I didn't save you when you were in danger?" Hearing this, Gu Xingyin almost believed that Yan Zi also had a wonderful experience. For example, rebirth. The system also gave an answer. "It has been detected that the mission target spacetime is in disorder. She has been reborn 20 years after Jiang Lan's death." Was he really reborn? Seeing that Gu Xingyin wasn't as shocked as a normal person, Yan Zi smiled. "You too, right? Jiang Lan." Gu Xingyin did not deny it. Yan Zi took this as a silent admission. It seemed that the person in front of her was the person who had experienced that scene with her. Yan Zi suddenly became a little emotional. "I really regret it, Jiang Lan, I'm sorry." She suddenly looked at Gu Xingyin, her eyes full of sincerity. Gu Xingyin raised his head in surprise. This development was a bit strange, wasn't it? Yan Zi saw that Jiang Lan was a little surprised and knew that she still had doubts about her. She smiled bitterly. Finally, in front of the person she had felt guilty for her whole life, she told her the secret that she had never told anyone before. "You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.